You have two eyes, huh? Do you understand the game a bit? Yeah, have a look.
I'm not saying anything to you in particular because I know you're not too accurate with your reporting.
That's what you paid
so you're
for.
Saying I should resign. So you're saying I should resign?
I think
that's
you
your
should,
opinion. Is that right?
That's my
opinion.
opinion.
Fine.
Are you going to resign then?
No, of course I'm not going to resign.
Let's simplify things next time.
Welcome, good evening. This is the national curriculum. I'd like to emphasise the national curriculum where we act in the national interest, not the Melbourne City interest, not the Melbourne Victory interest. We do what's best for the country around here. In stark opposition to, no, I won't finish that thought. Josh Parrish here alongside Joey Lynch live from the Amy Park press box. How are you, Joey?
Going very well. I am in the Michael Lynch Memorial section of the press box, not the main print media section, but the special room reserved for TV people, and when the TV people invariably aren't here, certain veteran members of the media pack. And
when they don't let you in, do you say, "Do you know who I am? I'm a Lynch. My name's on the door."
My name is on the door, but that's because I RSVP.
Teo Pellizzeri returns to the show as well. How are you, Teo?
Great to be here. Apparently, we've got the groundhog coming out and having a look around Sydney, seeing the sunshine for the last 2 days of the weekend, and deciding that we need 10 more days of rain. At least that's what I've been promised. So I am jumping onto TNC to talk about cooking, because I believe that's the direction the show's gone since I was last part of the panel. So I'm looking forward to hearing about what you're doing with tomatoes and so forth.
Well, the question is, Teo Pellizzeri, how do you make your pasta sauce?
Pasta sauce, mate. I'm off the pasta at the moment. So NA is my answer. And NA, unfortunately, is where we find Nick DeBano. Joey, you're at Amy Park. How far away is he from joining us? Yeah, there we go. How far is he away from joining us on TNC rather than actually working for money?
Well, it depends on how long it takes him to write his post-match presses. Reactions and update his copy. We just got back from Steve Corica and Steve Corica and John Aloisi's press conferences. Half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour if he's feeling particularly slow.
Well, Teo, artful dodge of the source question, so as not to jeopardise, the credibility that comes with your Italian surname. I thought we were going to get, I put ketchup in my bolognese or something, but you've dodged it. We're going to be joined by Taryn Heddo, not Hendo, later on in the evening, who's going to talk to us about the Matildas' 3-1 victory over Denmark, and a certain impact substitute might appear in that conversation. But we'll start with the A-League men. Where do we want to kick this off in this round? Shall we wait for Nick DeBano before we discuss events at Amy Park? Maybe we should start over at the Cake Tin. That's what took my fancy today, I have to say, over in New Zealand. A game that exploded into life in the second half. A disallowed bicycle kick, 2 chips. It was end-to-end stuff. It finished with a rather ridiculous own goal from Paul Iongo. But Wellington Phoenix 2, Central Coast Mariners 2. Teo, I found this one a really absorbing game.
Yeah, I agree with you. This, even when it was scoreless and the first half, I still found that to be reasonably compelling, although the bar maybe had been set a little bit low by some of the other games over the weekend in order to build up to that. I do find it interesting that the XG tally was so low for both teams, 2-2 draw, and it was 1.15 to 0.74, so maybe reflective of the good quality of finishing and also maybe some of the low percentage chances being taken by both teams. But I mean, you look at a goal like Ben Wayne's, you look at the finish that Silvera had, absentee defending, but still very nicely placed to beat the keeper. Jason Cummings gets his goal after having the more spectacular one ruled out, and then just a bit of PK League chaos at the end. It was good fun, and I actually think the Central Coast Mariners made a really big mistake subbing off Jason Cummings, because even slowing down, even at a walk, I think his ability to create and protect the ball, he's exactly the sort of player you would want to take it over to the corner in the last 5 minutes or more of a game. I really felt as though when Central Coast took a 2-1 lead, I even said in the chat, they might go on and win this 4 or 5-1. And I actually think they robbed themselves of a lot of the momentum that they had created by taking the lead. So as much as the Phoenix might have walked away thinking, we were good value and we deserved a draw, I actually think Central Coast blew this one, and they probably should have taken all 3 points.
What say you, Joey Lynch? Did Nick Montgomery fumble the bag here?
Well, I have to admit, I had this game on as more of a radio experience because I was driving to Amy Park early. Because
you had the Chotester on.
No. I had Paramount set up on my phone and just the screen off. But as if I'm missing a Jason Pine call.
I know,
for silly things like driving.
SEN New Zealand, one of my former employees, not New Zealand, but SEN, they had the radio going, and David Choate, 4 caps in the 80s. His career has this sort of serendipitous link to Ange Postecoglou because Postecoglou won his 4 caps for Australia right around the same years that David Choate was winning his caps for New Zealand.
I'm sure he's a very nice man. I want my piney. So I was listening to the feed in the drive-in. It did feel sort of like I feel like a draw from what I was gathering sort of felt like a fair result. Like the Mariners could have run away with it, but they didn't. And the Knicks were able to stick around. And last week coughed up a result when Adelaide came back to score very, very, very late on at the Cape Town. This time they are getting a very, very late goal themselves. So a bit of serendipity there. I was pleased to see, I was pleased to see Samuel Silvera starting. And B, I was pleased to see Samuel Silvera getting on the score sheet because I remember when he first came through at the Central Coast Mariners and, he burst onto the scene and everybody was getting really excited. I mean, he's had a bit of a weird career since then. I think you put in the chat, Josh, about how he had this random trial with the LA Galaxy that was just sort of like...
LAFC.
LAFC. Yeah. Sorry, I get my mixed up.
The MLS.
But then he went to the Portuguese leagues and it didn't work, and he came back to the Jets and it didn't really work. But now he's back at the Mariners, where he finally got that senior breakthrough after moving over from the Wanderers. So, I remember when he was breaking through, like he was a genuinely exciting player. He was genuinely able to make things happen. And I mean, obviously he's somewhat been overshadowed by the game-breaking players that have come through the Mariners since that time. But I'm really excited to see what he can do in the future. I think, he could just be another one of these players, young players that benefits from the Montgomery magic and becomes a really good contributor at A-League men level.
I mean, yeah, he's had such a weird career path, as you say, Joey. I mean, that trial was an all-time weird moment, given that it came in January of a season, and the Mariners just let him go because they thought they might get a transfer fee for him, and then LAFC never picked him up. He ended up going to Portugal instead, Paços de Ferreira, and then a couple of loans in the Portuguese third division, then another loan to their arch rivals, the Newcastle Jets, last season, and was perhaps underutilized. A lot of those 19 appearances came as a substitute, if I remember correctly. So now to see him in the starting role is very encouraging. And I think maybe a theme of this round is exciting young wingers coming back to the A-League for a second go-round and impressing on their return.
I mean, and you also have to mention for this game, Jason Cummings, the gun dog. Finally getting a chance to make a mark on this A-League men's season. Quite apparent that last season's relegation to the bench in the starting lineup was because of that shoulder injury, not anything else, because as soon as he's recovered from that, he's straight back into the starting lineup. And, well, obviously the big story surrounding him is Qatar. He's like in that collection of players that every single bit of analysis that we have of his performances in the opening 5 weeks of the campaign, because the squad's being named on November 8, which means that they'll only get 5 games out before that time, not 6. And for Cummings now, that's 4, because he had week 1 rained out. All the analysis is centered on their World Cup chances. And, well, 1 game from 1, he's got a goal. He's had another one disallowed. There were times when he was dropping around the park and helping to incorporate his teammates and doing other things. I don't think it wasn't like a barnstorming Cummings magnificent, get him on the plane immediately performance, but I think it was a net positive. on his journey to Qatar, unless you guys thought differently.
No, agree. Yeah, he wasn't at his brilliant best, but he was at his absolutely shown us enough to keep the momentum going. Josh, do you want to talk about Cummings, or can I move on to Ben Waine?
Yes, I do want to talk about Cummings. Absolutely. I want to talk about the cum dog, the cum lob that we got.
The cum dog.
Very nice finish. And I think.
Are we not doing phrasing? We're not. We're clearly not doing phrasing.
Absolutely not. There's a certain joke about Ronaldinho and David Seaman that comes to mind, but I'll leave that to one side. He offers so much in terms of the build-up play as well. Like there was a moment where he dropped back, past the center circle, ended up, spraying a pass out to the left wing and then burst into the box. And I was thinking, this guy can really play. He contributes in all facets. He's just been such a great find. And I do think he should be on the plane, whether or not, he's as gifted an athlete as some of the other striking options that the Socceroos have at their disposal. He provides something very, very, very different, and that's going to condition everything in the early rounds of this A-League season, as it probably should, because the World Cup is the biggest sporting event on the calendar. But every time I watch him, I think he should be in the national team, at least as a bench option.
There's 26 players. No reason you can't bring 4 centre forwards.
That's true. Do you need
like
to bring an extra centre back? Like, do you need 5 centre backs in a squad? Probably not.
I mean, invariably when you head to tournaments, the main areas that you want continuity with is in the defence. You want your goalkeeper starting every game. You want to keep your same centre back pairing, your same wing backs, your same holding midfielder. You get more in tournaments. Especially, you get more scope to experiment and try different things up front, I think. So there's no harm in bringing 4 centre forwards because I still do, especially, we'll get to Melbourne City in a bit, but I still do think Taggart, Duke and McLaren are going. And, especially given that the Taggart and Duke seasons are pretty much over and McLaren's already got 3 and 2, they're going. So, but I don't see any reason you can't. If Cummings keeps scoring, why you can't bring 4?
Let's get on board the Waine train then.
Choo-choo.
He scored a very nice disallowed goal as well. Cummings wasn't the only one, and he made good a few moments later with a brilliant finish. Teo, you went big on him in your fantasy team without stepping on our later segment, but you clearly have big tickets on this kid.
Well, maybe I'm just trying to make the most of it, because are we sure he's going to last beyond the January transfer window? He turned down Coventry City, which is fair enough. I don't know how much higher up the English pyramid he could plausibly push, though, given his citizenship means no need for a work permit. But we're certain he's leaving. Yeah, the Phoenix aren't going to be able to keep him until the back half of the year.
I mean, way to just dampen Phil Rollo's enthusiasm for the season. Nothing good can last.
Yeah, but hang on, won't they get a transfer fee and then they can reinvest it? And Ufuk Talay is the most intelligent, you'd probably argue, identifier of international talent. Luring home a Kiwi to fill a Kiwi spot might be a different story, but if they do make a bit of money out of it, for starters, it'd be well earned by the Phoenix and no doubt well reinvested.
You've also got to take in mind with the Phoenix that this year, now that they actually are finally playing back in New Zealand for their games, they don't have to go through the big song and dance of calling kids up from the academy this time around. Whereas previously, if you wanted to call up a kid from the academy, it inevitably came with a relocation to Australia and all of the challenges with that. Now they're pretty much back on a level footing with everybody else. So, the Knicks seem to, as of late, there's an argument to be made that the Phoenix have one of the most successful academies in the entire A-League in the past few years. So there's no reason to believe...
To be fair, they should. They've got the entire country as the only professional club.
Yeah,
But speaking of which...
But still, we talked for ages about Wanderers being existing in the most rich pipeline of talent in Australia, and they still screw it up.
So I assume you both saw the headline where Talay said there's definitely interest in the All Whites job and he'd love to sit down and have a chat.
Ricky Herbert 2.0.
Well, yeah. Is he going to? Wouldn't sharing both jobs be like a perfect alignment? I mean, does New Zealand have?
Tayo, this is TNC. We love a job share.
Well, but that's the thing. Does New Zealand have the same kind of Cold War conflict between their national federation and their A-League club, the same way that maybe we have the divorce between the APL and FFA here that we're all still working our way through? Or is it not the same situation in New Zealand where it's a far more harmonious link because it is one professional team and one national team that's not going to play another meaningful game for 3.5 years?
I mean, look, the answer to that is just look at the Phoenix's A-League women's team.
Yes, true.
The harmonious relationship between the Phoenix and New Zealand football. Like, I think New Zealand football produced a decent amount of funding for that A-League women's team. So that tells you about the harmonious nature of the relationship.
Well, and not just that, Joey. This is trivia, but they actually didn't have a single Wellington-based player, as in originating from Wellington, in their squad last year. They just pulled the national under-20 team from around the rest of the country. And only this season are they now signing players that have actually come through Wellington, the city. So that goes to show the magnet effect that being the only professional team in town can have. Or in the country, sorry.
Wellington fans and Kiwi football observers, let us know, what's the relationship status of the federation versus the club? Are they divorced? Are they still together? Is the money from the federation just alimony payments? Let us know. Comments are going off. Couple of shout-outs from our Kiwi correspondent, Phil Rollo, and from Antonis for Brian Caltech making his debut professionally at the age of 29, the Vanuatu international, and acquitted himself fairly well before he was substituted.
So,
Nick,
Josh,
sorry?
we had Cahill Tex. Do we now have Cal Tax? What's the name of the petrol? Do they have Caltex in Vanuatu? Can they do that?
Nick Stoll is in the comments. I think
the people of Vanuatu and a number of other Pacific Islanders would hope that we would all be lowering our petrol use.
Our petrol use?
Years.
Yeah, true.
Our Liga says no ticker Stoll, spot on. He also says Stoll over parish, which I can't get on board with. But Stoll says it's a long season, can't burn out. Ticker is measured across the whole year. I mean, Stoll, listen to me. I'm sick. I shouldn't be here, but because Joey showed me up a couple of weeks ago by coming on the show without a voice, I have to be.
How you guys going? I've set the bar for.
All right. I mean, don't burn out 10 minutes into the podcast, Joey. But yes, Ben Wayne, when I look at him, he always looks taller than 5'10". Like he seems like very well developed physically for his age. He's only 21. He seems to really mix it with, bigger.
No, but that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons I think he didn't go to Coventry, because I think he himself felt he wasn't ready just to be barged by meat grinder centre backs in League One or the Championship yet, and he needed to basically weigh more and be stronger before going over and taking on that challenge. And with the longest off season in the world, plus this first little pre-World Cup run, that might now be enough for him to be confident that he can hold up physically if he goes over to a meat grinder league and basically follows the path of Chris Wood.
Yeah, I mean, the heir apparent, I suppose. Let's move on, shall we? Anything further on this game? Happy to move on. All right, lovely. Let's go to MacArthur 2, Adelaide United 0. I'm going to clear the lane for Chief Ziony hype merchant Joseph Lynch to take a giant victory lap here.
I told yous all. I told yous all.
I mean, I seem to remember pretty much everyone in this podcast agreeing.
Everyone in this podcast agreed with me, but this is a royal yous, all right? As a royal yous, I told yous all. All right. Taking off the hyperbolic hat.
That's actually how you sum up Joey's accent. It's a royal yous. Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. Taking off the hyperbolic...
It's a blend,
Yeah. Taking off the hyperbolic hat. It's round 2. Just as much as a poor performance in round 1 isn't indicative of a trend, a fantastic performance in round 2 isn't indicative of a trend. However, I think we saw enough growth from Arzani from he did, even in week one, he still did some nice things in week one on the offensive ends. His real big problem was complete lack of ticker defensively, which is why you yanked him off. In week two, I think we saw enough of it wasn't a giant leap. We saw enough improvement in the defense that it wasn't just a complete black hole. But more importantly, we saw what can go right when Daniel Arzani is on the ball and doing Daniel Arzani things. When that goes right, there are very few Australian football players that can do the kind of things that he can do on the ball. And that is not me being hyperbolic. It's just a statement, as Keisuke Honda would say, it's fact. Daniel Arzani can do things on the ball that not a lot of other Australian footballers can do. And you can just see that in the way that he's treated. Adelaide went out and they kicked Ulysses De Villa off the park, and they spent some time kicking Arzani off the park because he's the type of player that you have to foul him to slow him down. And people have been talking for a long time about his end product. Well, his end product today looked pretty good to me, finishing that move in transition, and his end product in terms of delivering the assist for MacArthur's second goal with his new bestie Lockyer Rose. Those two are apparently quite close. That looked pretty. That looked pretty good to me. And I mean, you talk about his fitness and all that. He ran out 90 minutes today. So, I feel like Arzani has been unfairly maligned in the discourse. People focus on try to take pot shots at him for what he's not, when those things aren't really relevant, or people like to impugn his character, having never met him, never spoken to him, based upon a few things, pictures or something like that they see. He's still a young player, and I still think he's going to be a great player, and I'm really pleased to see him have a great game today. And I like the case was Cummings. I don't think he put in the type of performance today that immediately makes him must take for the Socceroos, but he's certainly closer to a place in Qatar than he was this morning, in my opinion.
I'm sick of the Arzani character assumptions that I see everywhere. And I also think, they're different things, on and off the pitch, I suppose. But the gesture that he made today after he scored, holding up the shirt with Masa Amini's name on it, if you haven't been following the news, it's the Iranian woman whose death in custody has led to all these protests and so forth. And I think that was the act of a very mature character who, thinks a long way beyond himself to plan that. And obviously has a personal connection to it because he was born in Iran. But I think that's, that speaks volumes for his character.
It's a brave thing to do. It's one thing to come out and protest the Australian government or something like that. It's a braver thing to do to come out and protest what's going on at the moment in Iran. And I agree with you, Josh. It does show character. And I think his character has been unfairly impugned in recent years, because what was Daniel Arzani when Australia first got to know him and all of that sort of stuff? He was a hectic teenager from Sydney that was the best footballer on any team he'd ever been on. Have you ever met any, he wasn't some sort of aberration. He was pretty stock standard for that type of personality, except he wasn't ripping up the under-20s of an NPL3 side. He was ripping up the A-League and going to the World Cup. But since then, he's been, I think, caricatured is the word that I think it was. He's been caricatured to be something, to be someone that he isn't. And I think he has taken that to heart a little bit. I spoke to him before the season. He doesn't look it on social media, but he gets sent screenshots and all of that sort of stuff. And his family sees it and talks to him about it. And that does have to weigh you down. And I think it's been unfairly. So I'm hopeful that this game, even if he doesn't make the World Cup squad, is the start of something where we can reassess our relationship with Daniel Arzani.
Just the amount of comments I see calling him arrogant or selfish or, doesn't work hard or he's a diver, this, that, and the other. I just think it's just the ultimate example of, tall poppy syndrome. And there was a moment today, actually, I'm drawing lines between things that maybe we shouldn't connect, but there's a moment today where he should have gone down because he was fouled inside the area and he kept his feet, and it would have been a penalty if he goes down. And I just wonder whether the boo boys and the haters saying he's a diver are actually getting to him, or maybe I'm reading too much into one incident. Teo, what did you make of the Arzani show?
Well, it's become, one of two sort of football culture wars that are being centralized entirely around individuals going on at the moment. And the Arzani one's particularly frustrating because who is he being graded against? In what world at the moment would you start Awer Mabil over Daniel Arzani in a World Cup game? I'm sorry, but Mabil's barely played a minute for Cadiz and can't get off the bench. He's an unused sub when he is on the bench. And Arzani at least is giving us exposed form. Yeah, it's at a lower level, but the decisions that Socceroos make in moving to Europe, well, Arzani lived that journey, didn't he? And he lived it a number of times with the decisions he made on which clubs he joined after, let's not forget, having his first move destroyed by an injury on debut. And Mabil's fully fit and not actually playing. So I'd love to know, when people go and nitpick elements of Arzani's performance, what exactly are they looking for? He is someone who can perform a specific role. We're already taking a goalkeeper to the World Cup who's going entirely for one specific role. So why wouldn't we take a winger? Joey mentions the 26-man squad. Why wouldn't you take specialised players who can do these sort of things? And just on Cummings, the one knock on Cummings is, would you take someone who insists on playing, do what Didier Deschamps is going to do, take a 23-man squad and then 3 players who are basically Paddy Mills waving the towel on the bench and have no expectation of actually getting onto the floor, right? But I do think that Australia needs to take everyone who can actually play and have an on-field role. We can't afford to take basically 3 team-first hype men, Ryan Scott as our 4th keeper, being the classic example, Josh, of who you would take just purely to keep the morale up in the dressing room. So why wouldn't you take?
He's great around the hotel, Teo. But he's great around the hotel.
In the case of Arzani, I do think he's kind of becoming, the straw man he is being compared against must be our best player, because who would you be comparing him with otherwise?
I think you're a bit more bombastic, boisterous about him, Taylor, than I am. I'm not calling for him to start at the World Cup yet. We've still got another 3 weeks.
Let's do that 3 more times, and then Joey will change his tune.
Yeah, but as you said, he's got a specialised role. As I said, he does things on the ball which not a lot of other Australian footballers can do.
Well, but Joey, is part of this because people don't want to have someone perceived to be rewarded for not doing what they think is the right thing, whatever in their mind the right thing is. And that's why I say it's become a culture war centralized entirely within one individual, because it has become more about what people think is right and wrong rather than simply about the football itself.
I think there's a certain level of, you asked Teo, who's Daniel Arzani being compared to against? Which player is he being compared to? I think what happens with Daniel Arzani is that he is judged upon, it's Daniel Arzani versus the Daniel Arzani we all thought we were going to get when he left for Celtic and went away. He's being judged on that. He's being judged up against a Daniel Arzani that spent 2 years on loan at Celtic. And then, let's face it, he was never breaking into Pep Guardiola's team, but spent a couple of years on loan at Celtic and then got a move to a Premier League side or someone like that. And he spent the past 2 years getting regular minutes in the Premier League and becoming one of the biggest names in Australian football. That's who I think he's being compared to and judged against. And of course, he's never winning that comparison, because right now, somebody playing regular minutes in a top 5 league is by far and away Australia's most successful player. But yeah, I think that is unfair against him. I just think you judge him. I think I've said on this show before, you don't judge a fish based on its ability to climb a tree. And if we're talking about a World Cup, I think we're talking about taking Alzani to a World Cup. We're taking Alzani to a World Cup to do a very specialised thing, in much the same way that we're not taking another. Let's use another bolter. And I'm going to make very clear now, I'm not comparing these two players. They are vastly different players. They are not in competition with each other. I am not starting a culture war. Stop it. But if we are taking Garen Kuwal to the World Cup, we are not taking Garen Kuwal to the World Cup based on his ability to drop back and marshal the opposition's right winger or play defensive cover for an overlapping wing back. We're not asking them to do that. These players on the fringes, we're asking them to perform certain roles, and that's what they should be judged upon.
Couple of great comments coming through. Blake says, there's a perception that if you return to our league at a young age, you're damaged goods. It's ridiculous. And it's funny because the A-League has the same stigma about anybody who drops down to play at NPL level for any reason. So it's sort of the shit rolls downhill, right? Geraldo, one of our favourites, rightly or wrongly, Arzani's World Cup chances probably depend on Tilio continuing to not play much, ironically enough. I think we'll probably get into that when we talk Melbourne City. But Teo, you want to jump in?
No. I just who actually compared Daniel Arzani or called him the next Harry Kewell? Did anyone other than sort of your mainstream journalists that don't watch the A-League but like to talk about sport on Offsiders or one of those sort of magazine shows like what's the one that had Tony Squires as the host on Fox? Like
the Back Page.
Yeah, Backpage or like a Wide World of Sports. Isn't like next Harry Kewell sort of the lazy low-hanging fruit that those journalists call it as opposed to people that actually watch the A-League? Surely no one was actually calling him the next Harry Kewell that actually watched the games.
Sam says, cap the tree climbing fish. Love that.
Hey, hang on. Strawman and tree climbing fish. France are scouting them because they're worried.
I think at this point we should welcome Nick Debano onto the show. Only half an hour in. Debano, you got your copy in pretty quickly this time.
Yeah, I am. Can you guys hear me loud and clear? Just trying with the AirPods set up.
How's the ticker of taking his podcast microphone to the media box, by the way?
Yeah, I tell you what, like carrying all this because we didn't get a park across the road today because the boxing and the basketball was on. So I had to walk all the way down Swan Street just with this big laptop and the microphone. Got to say, like my back was so sore by the time I got into the box today. But yeah, plenty of ticker here. I don't know where Joey's podcast microphone. Oh no, he actually does have one. It's off camera. I can see him in the other room.
Rarely do you catch a Yeti on camera, let alone two Yetis.
Yeah,
the Yeti.
Yes.
All right.
So, yep, we're here half an hour late, but we managed to actually, get all the filing done relatively quickly today. So that's actually, I thought it was gonna be like an hour late. So I think I'm actually on time.
On time in TNC standard time, perhaps. But Debano, he's still with us. I'll give you 30 seconds on Arzani because we've talked about it at length. Anything else you'd like to add?
Take him to the World Cup. I'm sold. I'm sold. He was great today. Yeah, just look, you know what? Like the misfortune of Tilio is his own fortune, I guess, for Arzani. But also, I think that was a really good performance. I think another big game next Friday, and I reckon it's going to be very hard to turn him down if he's going to be playing like that. So yeah, very exciting stuff.
Talking about the game more broadly, let's talk about this Adelaide United performance because they ended up racking up like quite a respectable XG, just swinging crosses into the box for Ibasuki and Blackwood. They couldn't convert any of them that weren't offside or hands on the shoulders climbing a ladder. But what do we make of this Adelaide United performance, Teo?
Blackwood finished like a ball-playing centre-back, Josh. You are spot on. I mean, he shot some really good chances straight at the goalkeeper and didn't really make Curto work. I mean, Curto's kept a clean sheet and probably wasn't among MacArthur's best players in spite of 2.36 XG and almost 20 shots total. Adelaide had, I think, real issues moving the ball. That's been a common thread on TNC, whether I've been on the show or not. I think they underutilized their wings. They seem sort of committed to, when the ball was swung in and they cross-spammed, it wasn't done in a way that actually maximized the ability of Halloran and Goodwin to move. I thought, we talk about them as the handbrake. I think we're starting to see just how much sort of luck was involved, and sort of regression to the mean is going to play havoc with their points tally this season.
I want to get some evidence on screen in a moment, just trying to track it down. But comment came through from Sam a little bit earlier, if I could find it. Josh, that clip you tweeted out of Isaias is outrageous. How is he still a thing? This is in relation to the manner in which Isaias gave the ball away for Daniel Arzani's goal. And I'm going to add a picture in a moment, which shows him in like frantic A-League terms, acres of space. And somehow this turns into a fatal giveaway. Like, what's going on here? What is going on here, gentlemen? I know this isn't great podcast listening, but there is at least
go back and watch the YouTube. Go back and watch the
space.
YouTube clip at 36 minutes, and you'll be able to
I'll
see
describe
this.
it. So Isaias is about to receive the ball. There's at least an average of there's about a circle of a 10-meter diameter circle of free space in every direction around him.
It is incredible, and the way it happens, he receives the ball in my best Jamie Carragher impression there, and then he takes this massive heavy touch, and then a second heavy touch, and just strides forward straight in the direction of Mombois as De Silva is closing in from behind him, and he just ends up getting sandwiched. And it's like if you just slow down, there's an easy pass out to Ryan Kidho, a really straightforward pass that would cut MacArthur open there because Al Hassan Toure is a little bit slack getting back. So, yeah, it's just shocking. And I honestly think that Isaias at this point in his career is living off his reputation and the sentimental attachment that Adelaide fans have to him. And
He's sort of been doing that ever since he came back.
Exactly.
Yeah, we knew this. I mean, TNC knew this. I don't know. Sometimes TNC knows stuff like a year. How long has the show been back? A year? Not even. It's been back not even a year, but it's known stuff a year in advance. I mean,
speaking of which, our Liga regression to the mean. Adelaide with cross spam, game plan U-shaped possession, ball out wide, cross, rinse and repeat. Infuriating. I mean, I don't think MacArthur defended particularly well.
Well, yeah. When we say regression to the mean, it's not because opponents have worked Adelaide out. It's just that Adelaide aren't doing their very predictable game plan. They're not executing it as well as maybe they could because George Blackwood shot straight at the keeper when he had 2 golden opportunities to score goals.
Shout out also to Ben Halloran for completely no-selling the post-match interview. It was just like, we tried, but we couldn't score a proper goal, so I guess we lost. What are you going to do next week? I guess we'll try and win. It's just
here's
Greg Popovich-esque.
I have to say, normally it's the role of the media to hate players for doing that. I know Ben Halloran is kind of, your favorite on this podcast, but I mean, normally if you do that in a post-match interview, you run up the flag that you don't want a post-football career in punditry and not to be offered that invitation again. So I yes, you can be upset with losing, but not be remembered for giving us a bit of insight, please. Right? Yeah, aren't you a great philosopher who's an author that's done a whole heap of stuff?
Well, yeah.
Have our memes just grown a life of their own and attributed a personality to this guy that doesn't exist?
Halloran has no need for the media superstructure. Thank you very much. It's just there to reinforce this capitalist system of oppression.
Manufactured consent, yes. He and Chomsky can go and discuss
exactly.
Yes.
Manufacturing consent, and Ben Halloran knows that his post-playing career lies in left-wing academia and possibly various other activities outside the realms of the
he'll just stroll into a media gig on your ABC.
Oh dear.
That was a joke.
Everything we say on this podcast should be
It's a
taken with
joke.
several grains of
Yes.
salt, or not seriously whatsoever. Just a disclaimer for you all. Shall we? Now that we've got Nick Debana in the room, shall we talk Melbourne victory 0, Western Sydney Wanderers 1?
We've brushed over a major thing with MacArthur. One of the reasons that Barzani maybe perhaps took on such a large role in that game and was such a game breaker for MacArthur. 12th minute, Ulysses De Villa, having been fouled, 4 or 5 times in the opening 10 minutes, limps off with a hamstring injury, which potentially could be, absolutely huge for the Bulls. I know we kept talking up Daniel Arzani in the pre-game, but De Villa also incredibly important, and probably we all tipped Arzani for the Johnny Warren. De Villa probably an actual more likely player to win the Johnny Warren, especially considering that we already know the refs have voted for him once. So him limping off in the 12th minute, bloke's 31 years old as well with a soft tissue injury. Who knows with those sort of things? So that could be, it could be a boon for Daniel Arzani's World Cup chances. However, it could be disastrous for the Bulls moving forward.
Joey, it was 4 fouls, but there was also 7 fouls before the 20-minute mark. And I think if you're Dwight Yorke, you're looking at this and you're saying, we need to work out what our sort of middle third set piece strategy is, because so many of these fouls are committed because they're committed in non-threatening territory where you might just play the ball quickly, move it sideways, get it back into open play. I do wonder if the sort of the next phase, given they've got such a tall team, MacArthur, they've probably got a team that's built for corners, free kicks, set pieces. I wonder if the next stage of their evolution is to work out a mid-range set piece game, because it is
needs
worth
to add a
remembering.
mid-range jumper to their game.
Well, they do need to add a mid-range jumper, because actually for all like the talented ball players they have in the team, they had 36% possession today. So I guess if maybe one of the reasons there is so much fouling is because they look at the taller options, whether it's Uskok, whether it's Aspropotamidis, whether it's going to be the former NFL player when he comes in. I think that what they do, opponents, is they're going to foul MacArthur in non-threatening territory. And so, Dwight Yorke, I thought Vince Rigari's article about Dwight Yorke and Russell Latapy was really excellent. Getting this opportunity in Australia, talking about lack of opportunities in the system for black coaches, but also coaches from minority backgrounds, particularly in the United Kingdom. I reckon Dwight Yorke's got even with De Villa injured, has a real golden opportunity here to be able to develop a winning team that's going to have an excellent season, even if they do have less than 40% possession per game.
I'm glad you brought that up, Teo, because my main objection to Dwight Yorke getting the MacArthur gig in the first place when he was announced was that it had been so long since he retired and he hadn't had any experience. But that article with Vince went into some of the reasons why he may not have been given those opportunities, and he was actually trying to get into management and running up against a brick wall the whole time. So I thought that was really important context behind, I guess, Dwight Yorke's path that he's taken to get here. And
but the thing is, once again, Vince Rigari maybe does what the people that make the decisions should have done as they made them. Like, 'cause remember when the All-Stars game was announced in Grand Final week, and instead of the announcement as to the context of probably not going to have a Sydney team in the Grand Final, we need a major football event in Grand Final week, we're going to put it in Sydney. Why was Vince Rigari the guy that came out and said that on his Twitter rather than a press conference to announce the Barcelona game that says, here's why we're doing it, here's the explanation, no one needs to go and go crazy about this, and then we only let the reason out as a response to the backlash? Why wasn't that context provided to the Dwight Yorke announcement when it was made, again, preventing the backlash? That's what I ask.
Perhaps it resonates more now because he's already won a trophy. Perhaps the point hits home more. But yeah, I take your point, Teo. Jackery,
because Australian football, in all senses, is loath to be the active force in any sort of kind of possession.
You're saying it's the 36% possession approach to PR, Joey?
Yes, just
We
the
haven't got
counter-attacking
we haven't got
approach.
out ahead of a story yet, and we're not planning to.
But getting back to like the 36, we mentioned on this show in our season previews as well, one of the questions with MacArthur moving forward is how much of their offensive capabilities were going to be actual functionality in possession and then being able to build up and play against a low block and all of that sort of stuff, or how much was it just going to be kick the ball to the Italian or kick the ball to the Iranian in this context and expect them to cook. 36% possession with Arzani starring suggests that it's the latter.
A couple of good comments coming through. Geraldo saying Davila's injury devastating for Mexico's World Cup chances, which is a callback to his own gag from like a week and a half ago. So I rate that from Geraldo. Jackery bringing up the very important point that we missed, that Halloran revealed he had a passion for bird watching on Adelaide United's website the other week, which I guess is more of a quiet pursuit. There's not a lot of talking involved, so no wonder he doesn't exactly excel in the post-match interviews. He prefers to be in peace and among nature, which I think we can all get behind. Let's talk Melbourne victory 0, Western Sydney Wanderers 1. Tommy Murchella, the unlikely hero, as Marco Rudan, we should insist upon, as he has, comes away with a smash and grab win. I'm going to go to you, Nick DeBarno, first.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting game in the sense of, all right, well, Western Sydney, there's something there potentially. I mean, defensively, they're really strong. They're really disciplined. They're willing to get down and dirty and, do the unfashionable things, and they're getting results. I mean, defensively, they look a lot better this year. So far, I know it's only been 2 games, and we said in our season preview, we don't want to, sort of go too early on the Wanderers and what we might think they could do this year. But at least from the opening 2 games, and particularly against Victory, defensively, they looked pretty damn good and didn't let Victory, counter on them. And they basically said, as a lot of teams do, if you want to beat teams like Victory, rely heavily on transition, you give them the ball. And you say, come beat us. Come beat our defense. They've got two man mountains in the middle of the fence in Tomislav Marcelo and Marcelo. So literally said to someone like Nick D'Agostino, well, try play through us, try and get through our low block. And the Wanderers did well at that. Callum Neuvenhoff looks like a great pickup for them. I mean, he's living up and he's showing glimpses of that potential that, we saw at Sydney FC a couple of seasons ago. And he looks like a very, very good signing for them. Defensively, again, as mentioned about Marcelo, he looks like a great pickup. Putting all the jokes that we'll talk about, pre-season to the side, he looks like he's going to be a very good pickup for them. And Cassini Yengi, oh my God, he was good yesterday, but, he was playing a little bit out in the left and tried something a little bit different, and Paul Lee Broxham was just at sea physically against Yengi, but also, just in terms of his quick feet, just running rings around him all day. And he was great. So there's a bit to life. If you're a Wanderers fan, I think there's reason for optimism in the early stages, about the occasion itself. Great turnout here at Amy Park. I think it was just over 18,000 people, which was a really good showing. I mean, the North End, over down here was full. It felt like a bit of a step back into a pre-COVID world of having a really good interstate away base come out to Melbourne, because we haven't had, bar maybe the Adelaide United second leg semi here against Melbourne City, a good contingent of interstate support travel down to Melbourne and, basically, fill out an away bay, which the Wanderers fans did. So to their credit, I mean, their early season optimism is coursing through a good, sort of collection of their fans. But I got to say, as I said, they've got something there in terms of they're going to be a very hard team to beat. And when they go back the other way, they're going to try and kick you in the teeth. And Victory, well, there's a lot of questions. Tony Popovich was the first one to say it. We were just not good. We just were not there. We were very poor. And they were. I mean, Nani probably should have scored in the first few minutes, hit the post from close range, and Brimmer had a bit of a deft header in the second half. But other than that, they didn't really create much. So a little bit to ponder, I think, going into a big Melbourne derby for them next week. But for the Wanderers, I think for now, I think that going into a game against Brisbane, there's every reason to think they're going to be 3 from 3 after next week.
Dabana, you were there. Just how much did the atmosphere contribute to the enjoyment of the game? Because I watched it from home and I thought it was a pretty rough watch, if I'm honest.
Oh yeah, look, not putting it bluntly, it was not a great game of football. It was a very, very turgid watch. As someone who was you're covering the X's and O's and you're watching it the actual game, it was not a good game of football. It wasn't something that most fans I think are going to be in any rush to go back and watch the replay of for fast flowing, free flowing football. But the atmosphere was great. Victory fans, to their credit, they're always the benchmark. And, we speak about seeing some quite poor turnouts we've seen this weekend, particularly today, compared to what we saw last night. It was light years different. I mean, the Victory turnout in the North End was sensational. They provided great noise, great tifo before the game. We talk about some of the tacky things some teams do before the games with trying to get the crowd into it. But I've got to give Victory credit. I mean, they tried with getting the cellos out pre-game and the light show and fire show. Like, it was actually okay. Like, I didn't mind it. I don't mind when teams try something new, even though it was quote unquote Real Betis inspired. It wasn't to the same level of Real Betis's pre-game sort of pump up, but it was good. And the Wanderers fans were brilliant as well. They provided a lot of noise for probably about maybe 200 fans that maybe came down, give or take. I mean, I'm not SMFC Mike with his manual crowd count, so I couldn't get the exact amount of people that were in that little pocket of fans. But there was a good contingent of them. They provided great noise. The bays, the best indicator of it is if the top bay on the far side is open, the top bay above us is open as well. They were open. It's good turnout, good fans. And I think some people probably got caught up in that a little bit, just the noise, the excitement of, a big crowd and, good noise and all of that, and didn't really focus on, all right, on the field, it was a pretty tough watch. I think if I can quickly find it, I think the XG for both teams was just like it was
1.2 to 0.57.
Yeah, that kind of sums it up.
Open play XG was 0.82 to 0.57.
There you go. And I think that there was only 3 shots on target for the whole game, and I think that the only 2 shots on target the Wanderers had was the first Macella shot that was blocked, and then the second one being his follow-up. So that goes to show exactly what sort of game we had.
Nick, I only had 1 point to make on this game. Do you recall when Nanny signed and we were talking about the sugar hit strategy, and I said that people will go to round 1, or in Victory's case, round 2, first home game of the season. They'll be enthused, they'll be exciting, and then the football will happen. And yes, the crowd was great, the atmosphere was great, the activations were great, but your points there are stark about the actual game itself. How many people who went for the first time or were brought along by a friend have gone for the one and only time this year, because the actual spectacle, the actual product did not deliver?
Well, it depends. I mean, you probably get some people going to the derby next week because, if any atmosphere is going to trumpet, it's the derby. And it's almost perfect that the derby's next week because you can almost put the facade up and go, hey, you know what? Like, that was bad, but we've got a derby next week. That's going to be even better. Like, don't worry. Like, it's okay, guys. Like, it's even better next week. It'll be a better affair on the field, or at least we think. I think when it gets later in the season and we start to see those games against MacArthur and Wellington and, the box office Jets and teams that, those sort of low NRI teams, it'll be curious to see whether you would get as many fans making the trek. Well, not even really the trek, making the trip to Amy Park to come to those games, and just comparing.
But the other issue is, didn't general admission sell out for this game, but the crowd's only 18?
I don't think it all sold out. No, the South End wasn't sold, and that's general admission. The top bays are premium seats.
There's South End memberships. So,
yeah, I think because the GA, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that they are like the sides of, because I think the North and South get like the 2 or 3 middle bays, and then the ones on the side.
Apologies, my source.
For exact.
My source is Reddit, and Reddit didn't have a link. But a thread was started saying general admission sold out for Victory versus Western Sydney.
No,
doesn't that mean
Victory was expecting 18,000 heading into the game, and that's about what they got.
Doesn't that, if someone is mistaken enough to think that general admission is sold out and would post it on Reddit, doesn't that mean that to much of your stadium is reserved or a higher category of ticket, and not enough of your stadium is general admission. If it's barely over half, if it's barely over half full, that's my question.
I would just think that's somebody maybe not quite getting how, what sold out means or all of that sort of stuff. Just a lack of familiarity with the industry, less so. Speaking with people from Victory, general admission, for the entire, the top level, the third level is GA. That wasn't sold out.
It's premium.
Yeah.
No,
It's
third level is not
seats.
GA, Joey. It's more expensive.
They're actually more expensive to sit on the top level.
Well,
it's like
that's my point. I guess my point is too much of the stadium is not the cheapest category of ticket. Yeah,
it should. It honestly should be the top. Well, I mean, it depends. We're going to go really into
it's not Docklands. There are no bad seats at Amy Park.
Look,
I do think from a perception point of view that the number is more important than the dollar amount that you make off the tickets at the moment for this league. And I think Victory's the one team that has a great shot at increasing that number.
I think as well, I think if we're going to go really into enough areas about football viewership and how you watch your football and where you prefer to watch things from a vantage point of view. But I mean, top level for me in any sport is always better than lower. I always think getting a bird's eye view or close to it is always better. But I think isn't it usually most stadiums around Melbourne and Australia that the higher you sit, because it's seen as more for GA and it's a less sort of
further away
seat. Yeah. So you're further away, so you pay less. Because I honestly, before I checked Ticket Tech during the week, I thought that it was always top was GA as well. But apparently the way it works is the more you're closer to the center, the more expensive it is. And the further you head into the corner flags, it's actually less. It's like a premium C, and then behind the goals is GA. Wouldn't you think that maybe you change it up and you go, let's change it up and maybe go a little bit more GA in the top areas, and maybe with those few dollars shaved, you might get a few extra people that want to go, because, GA in any sense is, again, without going into all the semantics of it, it is easier to go with more people because you can sit wherever, you can go with as many mates. You don't have to say, hey, we're going to buy 6 tickets all in a row. If people just sort themselves out and go, yep, you buy your GA ticket, I buy my GA ticket, we can all meet, we can find a row of 6 and sit wherever. So honestly, again, this is very sort of small things to nitpick after.
But it's not. But
it is a good point.
It does matter. It's not like the stadium is so snug and full that you need to go around being a crowd cop and making sure people sit in the right seats. There was 14,000 empty seats yesterday.
Yeah, 12, 14,000. I don't know what the exact at Amy Park is, to be honest. There's always changes. But I would have thought, more GA seats in the top level makes sense, but I don't know. I don't know who makes these decisions, guys. I don't know if this is a Victory thing or whatever. Yeah,
it could be a price category in between GA and Premium C. Slight markup if you're sitting on the wing towards the back or whatever. I'm sure they could, smarter people than us can come up with a pretty simple seating plan that would result in more tickets being sold, because GA, at Melbourne Victory games, GA behind the goals is always pretty busy. The wings are always bare. The top on the wings are always bare.
The simplest solution to sell more tickets is to make the league better.
Yeah, but people don't have much money at the moment, Joey. It's very expensive to live. I don't know if you noticed, but it's
inflation,
very expensive,
Joey. Inflation is.
Have you tried to buy lettuce lately?
Fair,
Jesus.
Joey's exact point was my original intervention to say, Victory had the first sugar hit. They'll have the derby. But then what's the retention going to be like playing the way that they did? And Joey, maybe that's a good cue for you to give us your thoughts on what did happen on the pitch in this game.
General, looking at both Victory and the Wanderers, and it's a league-wide thing, really, but we can just focus on Victory and the Wanderers right now. These are two teams that will inherently live or die based upon game state. What is happening in the game? We saw with Perth Glory and Western Sydney Wanderers, it was 0-0 in their game. Neither side were able to make a breakthrough, and it was absolute dross. This game, Victory come out with a vocal home crowd at their backs. They're trying to be more incisive and more active. They have a lot more of the ball, trying to be more active with it. Western Sydney, Now, whilst it wasn't entertaining for the neutral, it was still interesting to watch how much more comfortable they looked. They didn't look more entertaining, but they looked better, if you know what I mean, in this game, because the situation was favouring for them. Then you get the fortunate goal when Tomislav Mrčela decides he's Franz Beckenbauer 2.0 and goes on a run. And all of a sudden, they're up 1-0. The onus is on Melbourne victory. And what do you know? Western Sydney, it was a case for me of Western Sydney Wanderers controlled the game without controlling the ball. Like, the game was being played on their terms. They were denying Melbourne victory any sort of high quality looks. I think victory's shot on target that they registered was like in stoppage time in the second half. So like that just tells you about the type of shot quality that victory was able to produce against this Wanderers outfit, because they were able to sit back. Game state favoured them. The complexion of the game favoured them, and they were smoking cigars as a result. And that is going to be the case going forward. We saw Western United ride that sort of format to a championship last season, because you don't need to win in the A-League. You don't need to be the better team. You just need to be able to exploit the weaknesses of the opposition. And most sides in this competition struggle as the active team in possession. And so then it's more about who can soak up that the best. And it looks like Marko Rudan at the Wanderers has set them up. The talent that they have, they're going to do that very well. I mean, we saw the same thing with victory against the Sydney game. You think about how that looked. Sydney came out and they got their goal. Victory get a goal back from a set piece. Sydney tried to come back again. And really, the second that went 1-1, I never really thought Sydney were winning that game. I thought it was either going to be a victory win or a victory draw. And Tony Popovic basically, he was asked in that post-game press conference after the Big Blue how, you were really up against it in that game, because Sydney had all the ball and all the shots, and Popo was like, I don't think we're up against it in that game. And he was right, because just because you don't have the ball and you don't have shots doesn't mean you're not controlling the way that the game is going. So, yeah, this game just reiterated in my mind that, like a lot of the teams in the league, these two teams will live or die based upon game state. Basically, who scores first. Put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad the documentary team weren't following Nani this week. I think, that's considerably less return on investment there, because he hit the post early, but struggled to really influence the game too much. Victory didn't register a shot on target until the 91st minute when Leighton Brooks shot straight at Lawrence Thomas.
The thing is, we're talking about like their attack, and that's a lot more to do with the midfield than it is the attack as well. Like, they had Josh Brilliante playing as more of an 8 role. Normally, you'd expect it to be more of a double pivot between him and Ryan Marchand. It was more of an 8 role. I don't think he gave them a lot, especially in that second half when they're more chasing the game.
He's there to make late runs into the box. That's the point of that. We saw it a lot in preseason. We saw it against Sydney when he scored. That's his athletic ability that they're trying to rely on there. And I don't think Popper's going
when they've got a lot of the ball. Yeah.
Popper's going to play with 2 defensive-minded midfielders in his team, regardless of how he sets them up in the formation. The attributes are going to be, that's going to be the midfield 3 this season. I don't think that's going to change. It's the question is, like, Victory being so flat, how do they spice up the existing formula to actually hurt teams when the other team sets up defensively against them? Nick,
I got a thing. I reckon that honestly, I reckon they got to start. It's a very small thing, but I think they got to start playing economidas, guys. I've really liked what Ben Falami's brought to this team, but he just looks a little bit. I don't know if he's lacking in confidence per se, but he just hasn't had that same burst. Like last season when he was going, he was burning players, getting past them, playing with a lot of swagger, but just he set up the goal, Nick D'Agostino's goal on the Big Blue. It was a good cross, but he just hasn't looked the same in that same dynamism that he did towards the end of last season. I think he can recapture it. And I think, again, Popovic has got a really good problem to have between picking Falami or Economides, because not many teams in the competition have two players of that quality that you can pick from. But I think he's got to go with Economidis in the next game. I know he didn't have the best impact off the bench yesterday, but I think a player of that quality, if you're going to shake it up without changing your midfield, not dropping that spine, you got to look at changing something from somewhere else, right? And I think as well, they've got to also work out what is their best defensive unit. I know it's with Spira. I know it's with Jason Gary in the team, but if Spira's not going to be 100%, week in and week out, what is the starting back to? Is it Miranda and Broxham? Is it Miranda and Timotheu? Who's going to play it right back when Gary is out? Because honestly, I thought Stefan Negro played a decent game against Sydney FC that at least warranted
and a beautiful pass for
the
Economidis goal for Nani.
Exactly. So I think it'll be interesting if Spira's not back, what victory go with, because Timotheu provides more physical presence, but Brox is the rusted on guy that's played, week in and week out and has always found himself in the team. So I think it's an interesting one that they've got to weigh up as to what that starting back four is and what the starting front four is. If D'Agostino, Brimmer, and Nani are rusted on, then who is that fourth member? Is it Economidis or is it Falami? And I think they might need to shake it up by playing Chris Economidis next week.
I feel like the conversation Economidis for Falami, it's treating the symptoms more so than the underlying condition. Like you yourself said, Nick, when Economidis came on last night, he didn't really have much of an impact. Does that change if he's starting? It's more like in the build-up, like when the question is, when they have to take on games and dominate games, where is that drive from their defensive? When they're trying to break down an embedded defense, where is that drive coming from in the midfield?
Yeah, but we know it's not going to change. We know that's not going to change. We know that Brillante and Rai Marchand are going to be the pivot with Brimmer in front of it, barring an injury. I would be shocked to see it changing because he's gone with that from day one since he took over to where it is now. And look, it got him within inches of a grand final last season. I get that. But obviously there are flaws to it, as Joey is, and we've all spoken about here, but I just don't see it changing. So if it is papering over the cracks by maybe changing something on the left, sure. But I don't think they're going to be changing anything in the spine. So Economidis for me, he does give you something a little bit different to Falami. Falami's a bit more direct. Economidis is he's a bit more creative, a bit more technical. Maybe that's something they could do in terms of trying to break down some set defenses. I'm curious, because they've got to try something because, against City, against City, they're probably going to be the game's going to be a lot more suited to them because we know City are a bit more progressive. They're going to try to get on the front foot a bit more. It's going to be an interesting watch nonetheless.
We're, pontificating here, but Teo, you've run the numbers.
I have run the numbers, and but it's not the greatest stat. But Victory, 299 passes in their own half. Western Sydney Wanderers, 306 passes total. So when Joey Lynch says talking about who starts in what position is treating the symptoms and not the what is it, the disease? The
underlying condition.
The underlying condition. Then it doesn't really matter which winger they choose if they go and play 300 passes in their defensive half every week.
Well, it's going to be a very different game next week against Melbourne City. It's going to be an entirely different set of circumstances. So we may as well talk about Brisbane Roar 0, Melbourne City 2.
Sorry, were those the two teams? I thought the two teams were Patrick Kisnorbo versus Marco Tilio.
Should we talk about the game before we talk about that?
That was certainly the story to come out of it. But Jamie McLaren sent a message to all of the haters on his Instagram, the haters and losers out there, who have things to say about him, unkind things about his game. He scored twice, once from the penalty spot, then a red card early in the second half for Taras Gumulka. Meant City were relatively content to hold out onto that lead. But Joey, we'll start with you.
I put this out on Twitter after the game, and I can expand on it, but it's difficult to really pinpoint, and it's really difficult to take too many takeaways from this game if you're analysing Melbourne City, because Brisbane were just so bad. Brisbane were awful in this game. They had a one-man advantage for the better part of an entire half, and it still felt like they could have been attacking Melbourne City for 10 hours and still not produced just anything of note. I mean, they did end up producing, 0.58 XG in the second half, but that's just because they produced 0.0 in the first. They were atrocious, man. You can't beat around the bush with it in this circumstance. It was a really poor performance. Charlie Austin was, you saw it, you could hear him just screaming, get me the ball. And apparently they were there filming the documentary, and he's in the rooms at halftime screaming, get me the effing ball. And it's just sort of lamentable what has happened to Brisbane Roar. They're going back to Lang Park, but it's a Lang Park with one side of the ground completely shut and everybody herded onto the camera side and all of this sort of stuff. And I mean, once again, you talk about treating the symptoms versus the underlying condition. We all know what the underlying condition is at the Brisbane Roar. And I'm not sure what gets fixed until efforts are made to improve that circumstances. And because the fans aren't going to keep, the Den rocked up for this game, well done to them. But how much, if you're a Brisbane Roar fan, like Teo, you talked about if you went to Melbourne Victory versus Western Sydney Wanderers, and that was your first example, how likely are you going to come back? Well, I mean, if you're a Melburnian going to see Victory, at least it's probably going to get better. At least they're still favourites for the premiership and they're going to play finals football in all likelihood. If you're a neutral in Brisbane, what is your attraction to going to a Raw game right now?
Who knows? I mean, Jess has come through in the comments. No one was at Suncorp Friday. Thoughts on the Raw? They lack atmosphere and fan engagement. And Friday night was so apparent. I mean, I honestly think the fans should just start protesting, because that would be a way to get people to care about something.
I think the problem is the only people left are the ones that could be served up anything and will still be go team. Everyone hates Queensland. Why are you Victorian flogs so biased against the Brisbane Roar? And those are the only people left at this point. The ones that basically need state parochialism in order to keep flying the flag against the hated outsider. Anyone who can think for themselves sort of beyond that mentality probably got alienated from what's going on.
Well, there is one of the supporters groups was set up by the Backeries as well. So there's a divide there, and those supporters are never going to, that group is never going to express any dissent either. Geraldo saying Moon hitting his limitations isn't as painful as the Backeries and the broader neglect with this club, but it's not much better. Have we any feelings about how Warren Moon is coaching this team, or is it all conditioned by what's happening on the outside?
You could see what they were trying to do in this sort of game. They were sort of trying to do what Western Sydney Wanderers did to Melbourne Victory the night after that, or the Western United model from last season. They wanted to sit back. They wanted to deny Melbourne City. They were quite happy to lose the possession battle and the territory battle, but they wanted to deny Melbourne City good looks on goal in the hope that you can go up the other end, get one in transition, and then City have to open up a bit more, and then maybe you can get a few more, or maybe you can hold out for the win, which against the side with the talent of Melbourne City, is a viable strategy. However, and they did that defensively, I guess. They did that until the opening goal of the game, which ended up being McLaren. Melbourne City had three attempts on goal. All of them came from set pieces. City wasn't, until they actually scored a goal, City didn't create a single shot from open play, which I guess, this is me damning my own self, saying there's not a lot you can take from this game. It maybe is something that you can take from this game and at least observe going forward, that City, as we talked about with them last season, in open play against low defensive blocks, they can have their issues. So you can see what Brisbane were going to do. The problem was, they just there's nothing going in the opposite direction. I never once thought that they were likely to, really break in the counter. I think they had like one chance in the counter, but it sort of like faded out and they didn't get a proper shot off. It's like, it's all well and good to defend well, but there has to be something else going in the opposite direction to keep your opponents honest, to give yourselves a bit of hope.
I think when you got a player like Charlie Austin as well in your team, I just fear for him that they're going to waste him in the way they're playing at the moment. I mean, I do feel for him because as you said, he's literally yelling, get me the effing ball, and the fact that they can't progress the ball up to him, and even when they've got a numerical advantage, is extremely concerning. I know they were down 2-0. I know that City had certain profiles on the pitch which allows them to clog up space, but the fact that Brisbane had no answers to try and break through and try and put this team under pressure, for me, that concerns me a little bit. Charlie Austin, I don't know how much of the ball he really got. The chance he had, he sort of picked the ball up from deep and just thought, you know what, stuff it, I'm going to have a shot. And you know what, like, I don't blame him, but it's not an easy fix on the field. And I'm worried that Warren Moon is on a little bit of borrowed time at the moment if he doesn't start to get some results on the board. Because it's not as if Brisbane don't have quality in some areas. Like, there is quality in this team. There's Riku Danzaki, there's Jay O'Shea, there's Tom Aldred. There are players, Carlo Armiento. There's enough there, but it just doesn't look like there's much buy-in. There's just lethargy when they're going forward. I honestly, like, I am a little bit concerned for where the Roar are going from here. And it's a shame for someone like Charlie Austin, who's come here, who has so much buy-in and so much, he was talking about it in the pre-game interview. Whatever I've got to do to help promote this game, I'll do it. I'm here to really help this league. And if it just goes to waste because, he's just not able to, on the field, probably live up to his full potential. But as for Melbourne City, I mean, what is there really to say? Like, they scored they scored a penalty and, Andrew Naboo just slamming a shot into McLaren's toe and it went in and they were able to get the job done. They were able to put numbers behind the ball and they knew Brisbane weren't going to have enough quality to try break him down. And 2 from 2, it's hard to get a read on Melbourne City because, one, they're not playing at full strength defensively, and they've done well to only concede once in those games without having, they haven't really been challenged at all in either of those games, but been able to, I guess, withstand that. But, I mean, we just don't know what to expect and what we're going to get from them when they play a better team who's going to really put them under pressure, like a much more well-organised defensive unit, because Western United were so porous against them in that first game defensively. Probably should have lost 4 or 5-1 in that game. Brisbane Roar in the first half looked a bit porous as well. So what's going to happen when they play Melbourne Victory next week? And we know what Victory is going to do. And we saw what Victory did to them last season when they were able to hit them on the break. What's going to happen that time around? So I am curious to see how things change. But the other question I want to pose to you guys. Now, I mentioned this in our pre-show chat yesterday. And it'll be an interesting, because I think there's going to be a lot of focus on who replaces Taras Kamulka next week. Now, there's anticipation that Curtis Good comes back. There's anticipation that what that would mean is that, you might get Thomas Lam shifting into midfield if you want to have like-for-like replacement. But what if Curtis Good doesn't come back? Will we see Marco Tilio play? Or will he go to someone like Richard van der Ven? Like, will he go with someone who's a bit more of an 8 and maybe play a little bit, not have, 2 10s essentially playing? Or will he just go, you know what, we're going to do it. We're going to get Marco Tilio out there from the start, because everyone is going to be watching every single week that Melbourne City's playing. They're going to be eagerly awaiting an hour before kickoff to see if Marco Tilio is going to get minutes, because every week that he doesn't play, that he doesn't start, he's going to be more and more in the microscope as every sort of minutes passes before the World Cup. How do you see it all playing out from here? And who do you see replacing Kamulka? That's the question, actually.
Well, before we get into that, a lot of good comments coming in from Raw supporters. Shotsky says, going to see your football team on a Friday night is supposed to be leisure. After watching that Raw game, I felt worse. Definitely some blame on Moon. Questionable tactics so far this season. They had some moments progressing the ball last week, but on Friday they were awful. 3 at the back and wing backs isn't working. And Matthew says, "Wake up, Joey." So look alive. It's a long podcast, Joey. We've got a long way to go. But yeah, let's talk about Melbourne City's midfield conundrum for next week. And I guess the elephant in the room that's hanging over all of this, that Patrick Kisnorbo doesn't want to play Tilio, and it seems the more people tell him to play Tilio, the less he's inclined to put him on the field.
I think with the Tilio situation, I've been thinking about this. I've been writing about this for something that should be coming out tomorrow, but this is just one of the inherent things that is going to happen between club and international football. It's the unavoidable dissonance that occurs between these two things. Multiple things can be true at once. Patrick Kisnorbo is coaching Melbourne City to win football games. He is coaching Melbourne City based upon his job description, his job expectations, and doing what he believes is going to win them the most football games, win them trophies. His approach to doing this is devastating to Marco Tilio's chances of going to the World Cup. Both of those things can be true. And I don't think Kisnorbo's doing it deliberately to F over Tilio. I'm not, to be honest, thinking about this, I'm not sure why anybody is surprised that Marco Tilio isn't starting.
But no, we're not, because pre-season when we had this debate, we went round the table, and I believe Nick Tabano was cautiously optimistic that Tilio was going to be starting in the A-League because he had in the Cup. But the rest of us weren't.
I got egg on my face with that one. Because
but my question is, Tilio had agency in this.
That's the point I was going to make.
How is the line of communication so poor in the longest off-season in the world that you can't know whether or not you're going to be starting in round one? And if you know you're not starting, or if you're not guaranteed or given assurances or just a vibe that you're going to start, why wasn't he agitating to move unless Marco Tilio himself thinks that the best thing for his development is to remain a bit part substitute, which may result in him being overlooked for the World Cup?
Well, I mean, yeah, because you look at last season, you look at the inherent trends and biases and predilections of Patrick Kisnorbo as a coach. You look at the role that Tilio played last season. You look at the talent that is returning and the ways that they were deployed last season when Melbourne City did win the premiership and made another grand final. So it's not like, especially in City's four walls, they considered a lot of things went wrong that season. I don't know how you could be surprised. Tilio played 50.3% of available match minutes for that team last year. He is playing in similar positions to, he plays behind Matt Leckie, Jamie McLaren and Andrew Naboot. This podcast has exhaustively detailed what we believe is the City's preference for established veteran heads that will stay in the team, especially when they are winning. I mean, we saw at times during the COVID period about how we were anticipating that Melbourne City would rotate and play different players because they had short turnarounds and they had a busy schedule, and Kisnorbo would play the same 11 or a very, very similar 11 on 3 or 4 days rest because that's the type of coach that he is. None of this set teams should be surprising, I don't think. And Teo is absolutely right. None of this would be surprising for Marco Tilio. So, this feeling like people coming after Kisnorbo and all of that sort of stuff, it feels like, you're going after a dog for barking. Or something like that. Like Patrick Kisnorbo is being, let me just say this one thing. Patrick Kisnorbo is coaching exactly as Patrick Kisnorbo coaches. He's coaching to win football games in the manner that he believes. He's coaching in a manner that he believes will win football games.
Are you surprised at the amount of pro-Kisnorbo sentiment that's been out there? And are you also surprised that Melbourne City's own fans are almost entirely pro-Kisnorbo, and there seems to be almost the agitation for Tilio to get minutes at all is coming from Socceroos fans and neutrals and non-City fans. Why is it that City's own fan base seem to be totally in the tank with Kisnorbo on this one, small as their fan base may be?
Let me put it bluntly. They are winning silverware. They've won 2 premierships and they've won a championship. I saw tweets saying, Patrick Kisnorbo's done XXXX since he's taken over. Winning. And if it was any other way, then maybe there'd be more questions from City's fan base. But you know what?
Well, just before you go to another point, Nick, I want to build on that.
Go.
I think it's also the fact that Tilio isn't the only City player in contention for Qatar. City will absolutely be sending Jamie McLaren and Matt Leckie to the World Cup squad. It's not a situation like with Adelaide, like we saw Carl Viet come out and say that they're going to do everything they can to get Goodwin to the World Cup. Like, you look at the dynamics of those two fan bases. Adelaide United, it's only got one A-League men's side. South Australians are famously parochial. Just ask Lucy Zelich. So, there's an inherent sense of pride in getting one of your own into the World Cup squad. I feel like that certainly exists for Melbourne City as well, but I don't think it exists to the same level that it would for other clubs, both because they already have 2 players that will certainly be going. They have had their own issues with the Socceroos in the past, wherein the Socceroos took away several of their important players during the domestic season. So it's sort of like, maybe like Manchester City as well, like to use another CFG group, like Manchester City, their fans maybe, would preference, Pep Guardiola over Gareth Southgate. It's just like sort of that dynamic as well. The success of City means more to, I'm not saying they don't care about the Socceroos' success, but the success of City, it's a lot closer to a comparison than it is for somebody like an Adelaide United.
I mean, isn't the entire City fan base mentality, isn't that just everyone hates us, we don't care, and therefore, because we're winning, we'll side with the club on literally every issue? I'm yet to see
that's the default
City fans.
I think, the thing is that if you're going to support City, you kind of have to support the management on every issue. You can't really be a dissenting City fan. Otherwise, you were a Melbourne Heart fan that got off when the takeover happened. Really, it's a bit late now.
And I don't think there's been much dissent in the fan base since Mombarts took over. I think they've been pretty contented, so they're willing to back him in.
Yeah, they're winning. And that's the thing as well. As I said, multiple things can be true at once. PK, from one standpoint, from a perspective, is 1,000% in the right. As he said, he's not the coach of the national team. It's not his job to develop players for the Socceroos. In a perfect world, it is, but we don't live in a perfect world. As a certain former Sydney FC coach once said, the A-League is not a developmental league. I wonder what happened to him and if those words ever came back to bite him on the ass. But that's the situation. And that's also a case wherein you talk about incentives for development and all of that sort of stuff. Even developing players, I don't think, it doesn't carry the same sort of existential need that it does for the Mariners. The Mariners selling Garang Kuol is literally going to boost their fortunes as a club because of the money it brings in. Melbourne City have KPIs to hit and development, as being part of the CFG. I imagine that might carry just as much importance for them as trophies, but their club's not going to live or die on whether or not they sell Marco Tilio for a 6-figure fee. So that incentive isn't there.
I don't think it's about the Socceroos. I don't think it's about player development. I don't think it's some altruistic thing for Australian football, and I don't think it's about getting a transfer fee. I think Tilio is better than the other members of the front three. He's a more effective player in a ball-dominant side like City is a lot of the time. He is a much more subtle contributor. I just think PK's wrong. I just think
Well, yeah,
I just
that's
disagree with his football opinion. I don't think
Yeah.
it has to be a balance of ideologies or anything here. I just think this side would be better to watch and more effective in their game plan if Marco Tilio was on the pitch.
Yeah, but like that's an X's and O's discussion. I think we've long we've long on this podcast shared our views of the way that Patrick Isnorbo sets up that team and how we think it could be better. But that's, as you inherently said, that's a disagreement over tactics, which is what I think is driving Kisnorbo in this. In these thoughts surrounding Marco Tilios, which is why he's doing this for the right reasons. Should we say that? Like we might think that he's wrong in what he's doing, but he's doing it for the right reasons. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Sure.
look, honestly, Josh, I agree with you as well about the fact that I think Tilio is better than the players on offer. But I mean, fitting into what Paddy Kisnorbo thinks his best system and his best 11 is, obviously he sees it differently to us. I mean, we've been saying the same thing about Tilio being better than certain players in their team for quite a long time. I mean, you know, we all saw it, how good he was when he burst onto the scene that first grand final push. And from then, there were questions like, is he better than what's on offer? But
the most exciting football I've seen City play is when half their players were with the Socceroos squad.
And Marco Tilio and Stefan Kolakowski were leading the line.
Atkinson and Tilio.
With Atkinson, you know, it was a dynamic front three. But obviously the way that PK sees it, what has worked for him, and in his opinion, is what has been that front three with the combination in behind of before that Metcalf and Berengay, and now Valon Berisha and playing with 2 6s. He wants to, that's what he sees fit, is what he wants to do. Now, we can say all day that we don't agree with it. And honestly, as I said, I think Marco Tilio is a brilliant player and should be starting more often than not. But unfortunately, this is just the way Patrick Isnorbo, as he said, he's here to coach to win games. And, you know, I want to ask a question, like we probably have been in this situation, probably because it's late and I'm tired, and I'm forgetting maybe some examples. But is this a bit of like an interesting, like we haven't really been faced with too many of these situations where we've got a player that is in a squad. I'd love it if, please correct me if I'm wrong, but a player that's in a squad, but that is on the brink of making the World Cup, but has a coach that just is like flat out like, you're not in our best team. And that could actually be, you know, that little run of games that might miss it. Is it, if my memory serves me
especially when the
correctly,
player that he's ostensibly competing with is also Australian and eligible for the Socceroos.
exactly. Like
I can give you an example of that.
I mean,
4 years ago, at the exact same club, Warren Joyce had to be dragged kicking and screaming to play Daniel Arzani.
Well, I was going to say Tim Cahill because he left mid-season under Warren Joyce as well and went off to Millwall to get game time for the World Cup. And we knew Tim Cahill was going anyway. But yeah, I mean, Arzani, at least in his 50 minutes or so that he would play, he'd still get minutes. This is like, it's an interesting one. It's a very, very interesting one. That's like, it's opened up all sorts of cans of worms. But I think every single week that Melbourne City play, particularly when we get to next week in the derby, now that there is an opening in the midfield, there is an opening where there could be a change. Berengay is not coming back. We don't know if if all those defenders are going to be back. That would mean a shift. If Richard van der Ven starts ahead of Marco Tilio, the furor on social media between Socceroos fans and neutrals is only going to increase. And Patrick Isnorbo has every reason to turn around and say, no, you know what? This is how I see it. But the furor will continue to extend as well. Imagine a situation, Tilio comes on in the derby and wins the game for Melbourne City. Like, just putting it out there, fantasy booking here. What does that say? It would be so interesting to see how it all plays out from there.
I can tell you, some of the players might differ from this, but I can tell you how much Patrick Isnorbo cares about social media outrage.
Doesn't give, zero.
None. Zero. But like, I know we probably need to move on because we've been talking about this a lot, but I mean, when we're talking about placing things in the proper historical context, you only need to look back to last season to when Patrick Kisnorbo benched a young player on the verge of Socceroo selection. Nate Atkinson was on the outer before he got the move to Hearts. Remember, we were all asking why Nathaniel Atkinson like Scott Galloway was, playing, and like we were asking why wasn't the reigning best on grounds in the A-League Men's Grand Final a consistent starter for this team. It's the same situation. It's because Patrick Kisnorbo thought that Galloway would winning games, and he thought that Galloway was training better and putting in more effort on the training track. It's Occam's razor here. Like, why isn't Tilio starting? Because PK thinks he's more likely to win with others starting.
Teo, last word to you.
Quickly around the table. Does Tilio leave in January, or does he accept his lot? Is he going to actually take control of his own destiny?
I wouldn't be surprised if he leaves. I think if an offer comes on the table now, I think this is the time. I mean, Nathaniel Atkinson.
Well,
made
you
the
say
move.
offer. What if it's an interleague loan like Moragas going to Wellington?
Now that's no. I think leaving for an offer to go to Europe. I think I should be more specific in that sense. I think an interleague loan move would only really make sense if there was the caveat of a tournament that's literally on the other side. I mean, actually, you know what? No. The Asian Cup could potentially be in June if it doesn't go to Qatar. We'll find out tomorrow. Probably by the time some listeners hear this, they'll probably already know the answer. But, I mean, maybe, but probably the clear answer is he needs to aim to go to Europe, similarly to what, as Joe mentioned about Nate Atkinson. This time last year, Nate Atkinson did the same thing. Wasn't playing and then was off the Hearts. And if there's a similar move on the cards for Marco Tilio, he should take it. Anyone should take it. Chet's go play in Europe. I think he has to.
I don't think he leaves in January.
Yeah, I think that to end up in this situation that he's in now, having had the entire offseason, knowing that everyone in the A-League was only going to get a small handful of games, and he decided to stay in the A-League rather than agitate to move to Europe to start his season at the same time as everyone in Scotland did, I think he's going to be staying as well. But I agree with you. I just hope the circumstances lead Kisnorbo to start picking him as a starter in the first 11, whether those circumstances are injuries, form, enlightenment, whatever.
I don't think that Melbourne City would allow a competitor to be strengthened by an intra-league loan, and I think unless a really tasty offer comes in for them from Europe, I don't think Tilio is leaving. I think he's going to see the rest of the season out rotting on the bench, I'm afraid. But after all of that...
I think he's going to play more than he has in these opening weeks. Like, he got 50.3% of available match minutes last season. Like, he's going to play.
And also, like, Lecky and McLaren probably making the World Cup squad and then coming back.
Yeah. Like,
he's
going to play more than he has.
A history of injuries as well.
He's going to play more than he has, but it's difficult if it's... let's just say... unless things rapidly change in the next 3 weeks, he's not going to Qatar.
Well,
but he's 21, so he's got plenty of World Cups to come.
All right, I'm officially wrapping us up on this topic. After all of that, Melbourne City, 2 wins from 2, top of the league. So, what are the haters and losers on this podcast? No, I suppose. Newcastle Jets 2, Perth Glory 1, a 94th minute Becca Mikkeltadze winner. Despite going down to 10 men, thanks to Jordan Elsey doing his best Roy O'Donovan impersonation to get sent off and concede a penalty upon VAR review. Newcastle Jets get the win. The box office Jets probably didn't put in the sort of performance that perhaps deserved the 3 points to start the season, but they got him in wholly dramatic fashion. Who wants to start us off on this one?
I mean, they were one of only 2 teams to win this weekend with more of the ball, even though their XG was only 0.57 and their open play XG was 0.51. So Daniel Pena's absence was always going to be the burning question about Newcastle. I had this game on for the full 90 minutes. I didn't watch it closely as I watched the triple header today. But I still feel as though Newcastle probably deserved to win and were their own worst enemy with how they let Perth back into the game.
Phil Rollo, by the way, on our last topic, do a swap with the Mariners, Marco Tullio for Marco Tilio. Well, I mean, if it was if it was Jason Pine calling the action, I probably wouldn't be able to hear the difference. But actually, I loved the Sky Sports or whatever broadcast today. I thought it was fantastic. Actually,
They say we a lot when talking about Wellington, though, don't they?
There's a fair bit of parochialism there, but that's what makes it fun for me. And Paul Eiffel was good on halftime, and I don't know who the co-commentator was, but I thought they were really, really good.
Is this the closest thing to like having Wellington Phoenix fan TV? Like, like having, how like in not fan TV, but like, how in
like an NBA, like League Pass broadcast.
Yeah. How you got like their own paid broadcasters that do it for like the local stations. Like, I think it's great. I think we need more of it.
Back to Jets glory. This didn't bode especially well for Glory, given they were gifted an equaliser and a man advantage, and they ended up conspiring to lose the game.
Well, I mean, the man advantage wasn't the gift, but I don't think it was a penalty.
Oh no, I don't mean necessarily it's a wrong decision. It's just like one incident flipped the entire game in their favour going into the last 20 minutes, and they couldn't capitalise. Is what I meant. Whether it's inside or outside the box, I'm not sure, but certainly the right decision to upgrade it from the second yellow to the straight red.
All I got to say, from the limited amount of time that I saw of the game, because was heading to the Victory Wanderers game, how did Perth concede that goal? Like, it's 1-1. You've got more players on the pitch, and you let a big hoof to Josh Sotirio and then across to Mikkel Tadze happen. Like, it was just baffling. Like, what is going on? But just quietly, what a bloody finish from Mikkel Tadze, though. Like, that was a beautiful goal. And he has picked right up off where he left last season. And it's great to see. So Forza box office Jets. For a moment, we're a bit worried that maybe the train might be derailed for a second. They might not get 4 points. But you know what? End of the day, it's a big win for them. So kudos to them. But for Perth, far out's a missed opportunity. Like 20 minutes with an extra man on the pitch. You said potentially gifted a bit of not a harsh penalty in terms of the action, but in terms of where the foul actually happened. But yeah, they should have gotten at least something from this game, Perth. But Newcastle, got to say, great finish for Mikkel Tadze. And at the end of the day, they get all 3 points.
Phil Rollo informed us the co-commentator on the Knicks game was Jacob Spoonley. Yeah, there's a lost A-League name from the past. Fantastic. Teo, how do you feel about Mustafa Amini confirming all of the negative stereotypes about redheads? He was so angry. He was so angry today or yesterday.
Yes, but I think he still did the post-game interview in a composed fashion afterwards. So it was very much white line fever on the pitch, and no comment otherwise.
Just no selling me there. I was expecting more, I have to say. The celebrations after the goal from the whole coaching staff, the fans, everyone, it was just good scenes. It was just I thought it was a great moment. Hopefully that gives the season for the Jets lift off. No pun intended. What do we think of Becca 2 first impressions? Dart Smellier? Any thoughts?
Too much of the game, so okay. I can't really comment. But apparently he was all right. That's what I heard.
Apparently I was the only one who watched this game. Okay, fair enough. Look, Glory. Most of us tipped them for the wooden spoon. I think I didn't see anything that changed my mind on that front. But yeah, early days for both teams. The Jets had 2 shots on target and scored 2 goals, so a bit of a smash and grab. But it's a flip of the script from last season where they played well and lost all the time. If they can play badly and win sometimes, that's a huge step in the right direction. So,
that was reflected in Mikkel Tadze's performance. Mikkel Tadze didn't actually play well yesterday. I mean, he had heading into the last 10 minutes, he'd had 1 effort on goal, a header that had gone wide. And then his second effort on goal, he talked himself into a yellow card, insisting that it was a corner and not a goal kick. And then his third effort on goal is the winner. So that just sort of like shows you that strikers like him, you can't turn off them for, in this case, 95 minutes because he'll punish you. And he's got the talent. Even when he's not playing well, he can still win games. And maybe that's what the Jets need to, start doing, as you said, Josh. Winning games where they're not supposed to, because I mean, Senior FC created a dynasty that way.
Well, yeah. I mean, it also did wonders for my fantasy team, Becca, getting on the score sheet. Certainly, Becca 1, keep him in your fantasy team. Becca 2, I don't think, I think the jury's out, but yeah,
Tell
hopefully
you
he
who
becomes
was
good.
good for my fantasy team from the Jets, Carl Jenkinson.
Yeah, nice
I think Carl
cross.
Jenkinson's going to be, getting up the touchline. He's obviously got talent. I mean, you don't come up through, the Arsenal Academy and play Champions League football against Bayern Munich unless you have some shred of natural talent. So I think he could be quite a handy pickup for the Jets heading into this season. Obviously, he seems committed to living in Australia and giving a proper go at it. He had offers to return back home, but opted to stay here in Australia and sign with the Jets. So I think, he's got a real chance to be a difference maker, especially in that Papa system moving forward.
Yeah, it was a really nice first touch to bring that switch of play down, and really good cross for the LC goal. So good signs from what do they call him? The corporal, I think the Gooners fans called him a corporal. Fitting,
corporal,
given Newcastle's kind of military and Air Force association.
See, because his name's Jenkinson, I just associate him with Leroy Jenkins. And I was like, Jenkinson.
That's a pretty good summation of the Jets, attacking
Leroy!
attitude. Is to
I
charge
will
forward
use intimidating shout.
with no regard for the consequences.
Oh, God, get in there, guys, get in there. Yeah, whatever.
All right, we're going to be catching up with Matildas expert Taryn Heddo very shortly, but one game to go in the A-League. That was the one we just saw. Western United 1, Sydney FC 3. Leo Lacroix has fallen off a cliff. What has happened to the best defender in the A-League? Quite
Oh boy, mate, it's I don't know. Like today was tough to watch. Like not just from Leo Lacroix, Josh, but everything from Western United. Like they were just off in everywhere. My God, I know it's only 2 games in, but I'm really worried about my championship prediction for them to go back to back. Like I am really worried about my prediction. But look, you know what? Like they just not even once the first went in, but even before that, with the real direct nature of Sydney for that first penalty, they were just opened up. Lacroix gave away the penalty. The middle of the park was open. Like there were just chasms of space that Western United were leaving, and it was really uncharacteristic compared to last season, where they just shut up shop and were able to sort of choke teams out. And it was born, obviously, at the back of some of Lacroix's performances, who last season barely put a foot wrong. Like he was unbelievable all year, but this year just looks like a shadow of the player he was. I still think he can turn it around very quickly because he has a lot of quality, and I think that as the season progresses, we'll see the better of him, or at least I hope for Western United's sake. But it's not just the issues in defence, guys; it's the issues going forward. Without Alexander Prijovic, again, they just look so toothless going forward. They lose that reference point. Wenzel Hall's had a great opportunity to score that goal, and I still can't believe at least he didn't put it on target, and he should have done better. And then seconds later, James Troisi spurned a great chance of his own. So, yeah, they've got John Aloisi, was quite confident after the game that they could turn it around, but he set the challenge to him and said, like, I can only say so much, but the players are out there. They know what they have to do, but they have to pick up the scraps, and they've got to find it within themselves to turn it around because they know what to do. We've got the culture. We've done it before. We just got to get it going on the pitch again. But, until they get Prijovic back, and even without Tomoki Mai in defense, they're going to be hampered, especially going forward and in defense as well. There's some serious questions there because today they were just carved to bits. And it's not even like Sydney were great. They were really good in moments of transition through Mac and Lolly. I'm sure we're going to talk about, a lot over the next little bit. But it's not like Sydney completely bossed them. It was just that Western were just completely at sea all game. They were just not in it. Even when they scored, like, I don't know. They looked like a shadow of themselves, in my opinion.
Jackery says no Prijovic, no Western. Julian asks what changes should Aloisi implement. I've got a brainwave here. There's no Prijovic, but there is a player who's clearly trying to style himself like Prijovic Made a cameo off the
most.
bench today. Noah Botic is in full Prijovic cosplay, and it's a bold gambit for a young player to try and get minutes. You know, we often talk about human victory cigars on this podcast and young players being given very token substitute appearances, but trying to disguise yourself as a senior player in order to get on the pitch earlier is a bold gambit, and I love it. Noah Botic.
Knowing your predilections, Josh, I thought you were about to suggest converting a centre back to play striker again.
No, I only do it the other way around. No.
What? Yankovic doesn't exist now?
Oh, that's true, actually. I forgot about the NPL. Yeah.
For those of you.
For those at 1 minute 49:24.
How could I forget?
I forgot about the NPL.
For those of you that were for those of you that were there, how disruptive has Troisi's presence in that midfield been to, you talk about the openness, Kilkenny, Lustica, the ability to strangle games and cramp. I mean, Payne and Wales are there from last season. So is the issue Troisi's presence? Or from the eye test, from what you saw today? Because nothing jumps out at me looking at the stats. I had the game on. I thought this was really, individual brilliance from the two wingers. I mean, against players, in Risdon and Garuccio, who otherwise would have backed themselves to win 50-50 duels and contests. And instead you see Lolly skipping around Garuccio like he's not even there for the goal. But, I mean, so where did you diagnose the problem being?
I just make a really... Sorry, I was just going to make a really small point, Joe, if that's all right, just really quickly. What I want to say is it's changed because when they won the championship last year, as I've said time and time again, the Prijovic, Wenzel, Halls combination worked to a T because of the way that Prijovic was able to just literally knock it down Route 1 style to someone as speedy as Dylan Wenzel Halls. The whole thing has changed, and it reminds me of how they looked when they had Diamanti in the team prior to that and had someone who was a bit slower and in some areas was a bit of a handbrake. So that's sort of the way that I've seen it. Joey, continue. Sorry.
You can simply make it the argument that this is less things going terribly for Western United and more so regression to the mean. Like, it's not like this was an invincible juggernaut last season. Especially,
well, I mean, Sydney, their last really awful loss was the 3-0 to Sydney, where they had a goal disallowed in the first 2 minutes and then didn't threaten for the rest of the game.
And they also lost heavily to Wellington at one point last season as well. Like, one could argue that last season represented a significant overachievement in a coach's first season, implementing a brand new system, combination of a variety of factors going super well in the club, great vibes, the combinations working really well, a number of players having career best years, a number of other clubs having down years, and the league as a whole, sort of the weaknesses of the league perfectly meshing with the strengths of Western United. And one could make, it's round 2. So, which goes for everything on this show, it's round 2. We are just trying to extrapolate based on a very small sample size here, and everything that we say on this show will be updated as the season goes on. But you can begin to question whether or not Western United was due to regress to the mean at some point, and it's less everything going wrong, and we're just more so seeing what probably is more in line with expectations.
I haven't seen the sort of invincible edge that they had they went ahead of this game. It was a jammy goal, big deflection. I think it was an own goal. I don't think Risdon's shot was going anywhere near the target before it took the big deflection. And, when Western got in that situation last season, they set up shop and you couldn't break them down. And they were really porous. And no, I think the point you brought up about Troisi is valid, Teo. I mean, that's something I pointed to in our preview podcast, that I didn't understand the signing because, if anything, he's kind of a similar figure to Diamanti, and why would you have them both in the squad if they offer pretty similar things and arguably compromise your most successful game plan? So yeah, I don't think this is tremendously surprising from Western United. I think once they get a couple of players back, they will look better. I mean, they've lost one of the league's best strikers, of course, through injury or illness or whatever it is, and he's had a late preseason and so forth. So I'm sure with Prijovic in the team, they'll look a bit better. But Debano?
I reckon they need to shake things up a little bit in the starting lineup. I know they probably won't, but I would love to see a bit of a shake up in terms of personnel, just to try something new, because I think that when you're sticking with a lot of the same team as well, players can become comfortable and, can almost just, I mean, it's natural when you're comfortable in something, your effort sometimes might just drop. You're just not giving that extra bit of oomph because you're just comfortable. You're in the same spot. I would love to just see a little bit of a change in that Western United lineup. I know it probably won't happen, but whether it is starting Nick Milanovic in behind, whether it is giving Seb Pasquale a start or Reece Bozanovsky when he comes back from international duty a start in midfield, just to shake things up and try something new, because this team does need, and I can't believe I'm saying this just after winning a championship, but when your team has an average age of 31 that's rolled out, you do need to shake things up a little bit, because it just seems right now like they really do need to make some changes in that team. Like, I know that it might not change everything, but you just might see a little bit of something new, a bit more imagination. Like, Nick Milanovic has looked really good when he's played. Like, I think we've got to see more of him. I think there's an opportunity to really have a really talented player on their books. They've got a lot of really talented players. I mean, you mentioned Noah Botic. All jokes aside, the kid, like, he was, what was he, Young Player of the Year a few years ago? He was named in the
medalist, PFA.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he was labelled. I mean, even though the label gets passed around like anything else, but he was labelled the next Mark Viduka. And people don't just say that because he was a Croatian Australian striker. He has ability. He was on the Hoffenheim books. Like, he can play football. And I think it would be great to see someone like Botic, Milanovic, Pasquale, Adisu Bayu when he gets back. There are players there with quality in that team. I just think they've got to potentially shake things up a little bit in that lineup, just in some areas, and just see if it works, because it just seems like sometimes, and maybe it might be happening, that some players might be going through the motions a little bit. But again, we'll see what happens next week. There's a good chance for them. As John Aloisi said, there's a great chance to quickly put it behind them against MacArthur on Friday night, which I think is going to be a real good test for them. Because if they lose and go 0-3, and they start to fall into that, pitfall, I know it's a 26-game season. There's a lot of time to turn it around. But going 0-3, it can snowball. And it can snowball very quickly going into a World Cup break. And the last thing you want going into a World Cup break is, being on the wrong side of 500, if that's really a terminology you can use in A-League circles.
I think we should move on to Sydney. Perhaps I've gone too early here after a win, and a comfortable one at that, but I didn't like a lot of what I saw from the Sydney midfield today. Again, Burgess starts on the bench, and I know we harp on about him a lot, but again, it's disappointing, because I thought the entire reason they shifted to a 4-3-3 and were going to take a more proactive outlook this season was to start Burgess in the midfield three. But instead, they've deferred to Luke Bratton as the 6, who, sprays a lot of 30-yard passes out to both flanks, and takes a lot of time on the ball. And Patrick Yazbek has been pushed higher up the park into a sort of shuttling role where he's supposed to make runs, in between the opposition fullback and centre back. And yeah, there's a lot of this midfield construction with both of these 8s playing out wide. I don't know how many times I saw Anthony Caceres hugging the touchline, but these flow-on effects of having Luke Bratton as your unquestioned starting 6 when you have the ball, I don't see it working against better opposition for Sydney.
Well, it's all going to be coloured by having let Nieuwenhof go for starters, and then go to Wanderers, and now he appears to be the centrepiece around which Radan is building that Wanderers midfield, and so far, so good.
I mean, I'll believe that your last statement, Teo, when he starts Bozanic over, when he starts Neuenhoff over Bozanic, I'll believe that statement when Bozanic is fully fit. But I did sort of ask Corica, because he said they were playing a lot better in the second half and all that sort of stuff. So I kind of asked him, because you can't just flat out come and say your midfield composition is a bit shit. Why is that? Because they'll just clam up and they won't say anything. Because I did see your tweet, Josh. So I sort of tried to ask him about how things got better in the second half, but it's sort of he for a start, he completely ignored the game state, which I think was probably the key in that second half about how the game was opening up, and I'm just trying to find
Western had to come at them in the second half, and they had no idea what to do with the ball. So Sydney were back in the warm embrace of counter-attacking reactive football. That made them very comfortable in the second half and totally conditioned the second half performance.
Yeah. I can't find the quotes, but it was interesting about how, that wasn't referenced at all by Corica post-game. Oh, here we go. We looked at halftime and a couple of things on the video that we changed around. This is about what they shifted for the second half. You probably saw Ryan Grant coming a little bit more inside and picking up the ball, and I think that worked really well. Joe Lolly dropping down a little bit as well, leaving him 1v1 to dribble, which he likes to do, and I think that worked really well. I think we were just a little bit slow in the first half, so we needed to speed things up. We needed to break their press, because in the first half, I think we were a little bit negative and we went back too much. Just reading that now, basically all the improvements were down to basically game state.
Matthew is a Sydney FC fan. He's upset by letting Neuenhoff go. A couple of food-based comments, which we always encourage on this podcast, or as of the last few weeks. Jackery says, can we make Lolly's nickname the Candyman? And Shake says, Sydney had a food hat-trick, sausage roll, Big Mac, and a lolly. Not very healthy, but certainly very tasty. And those were two very tasty goals, weren't they, Nick?
Oh, mate, bloody hell. Robert Mack and Joe Lolly was like mirrors, like literally like the same goal, just at the other end. And on, I think, it would have been the opposite sides of each box. It was two brilliant goals. Like, Robert Max was so aesthetically pleasing of the way it just like dipped into the bottom corner and it hit like the perfect apex right in the bottom corner there. It was such a lovely finish. But boy, those two look really good together, like on those wings. Like Mac and Lolly, just the way they were able to get in, cut in, do what they had to do. They were very dangerous. And, Lafondra looks like he's still finding his feet in this new system. So I'll be curious to see, once it, is fully fledged, whether they can be all on the same page. But so far, I'm liking what I see from Robert Mack and Joe Lolly.
Well, with that, I think it brings our A-League men's chat to a close on the magical 2-hour mark. And with that, I think we should bring in Taryn Heddo, not Hendo, but Heddo. Matildas 3, Denmark 1. Taryn, welcome back to the show.
Hold on. Taryn's a Central Coast fan. First, Taryn, what did you think of Mariners Knicks?
I think that it is unfair to disallow goals when they are fun. And
I agree.
I don't know. No, it's everything about the Mariners that I enjoy and also hate. Being very fun and then also being very frustrating. That's the entirety of the analysis.
I wanted to bring up your tweet, Taryn. Your mood shifted quite quickly.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was very much enjoying my afternoon when we were 2-1 up and looked like we'd won the day, and then my good mood slipped through Vuka's fingers. So, unfortunately, that was the end of that. No, in all honesty, like whatever. It was an enjoyable game. It happens. It's fine. I'm over it.
I'm glad you're so philosophical about it. Matildas 3, Denmark 1. I had shades of Australia's, 2006 World Cup game against Japan about this one. The late comeback, the 2 goals in quick succession, and then the third, spectacular goals as well. It gave me a similarly uplifting feeling about the team. What did you take away from it?
Well, we won. And we
RBA, big time RBA.
Results-based analysis.
We won, but we didn't just win. We actually did outplay them. I think at halftime there was a sense, I certainly was getting this sense of impending doom. Like, okay, we've seen this so many times in the last few years for the Matildas. We've gone 1-0 down early. We're not going to score. It's going to be 1-0. I was sort of at the, halfway through beginning to write a match report, and I'd sort of written that first sentence of, the Matildas valiantly go down 1-0 again. And then that didn't happen, and that was fantastic. I think I really enjoyed the change in. I really enjoyed the win. That's just like, firstly, before we dive into any kind of analysis, it was just a nice feeling to win the game. I think the change in formation was something that I really enjoyed, and I think it's something that we've talked about a bit on TNC, is this kind of over-reliance on the 4-3-3 and the lack of ideas and the lack of changing that formation. And we went to up top and it worked. So I think that was really good to see, and it let Sam Kerr have a bit more impact in build-up play. We saw some really good link up with Ford sort of slotting into the 9 at times, and Kerr dropping back, and Russell dropping back into the midfield. So yeah, I think there's a lot more conversation to be had about it that I'm sure will be had about it. But I think, as just sort of initial thoughts, I'm glad for the change in formation. I'm glad for the win, and it definitely makes you feel a bit better about things moving forward.
James has come through in the comments. He says, "Is this thing still on? Didn't you start at 7?" The answer to both questions is yes, and I'm mindful of the Amy Park press box lads. You might need to head off at this point, lest you be locked inside the stadium. Yeah. Joey, did you want to jump in with any takeaways moving forward?
Yeah, my biggest things coming out of this series, obviously 2 wins from 2, is, especially given the context surrounding this team, the discourse surrounding this team heading into the series, 2 wins from 2. Top result, well done. We're winning the World Cup and all of those sort of things. But my biggest question coming out of this thing is, and it's been the same question coming out of every series when there has been green shoots in this current era of the Matildas, what has Tony Gustafsson learned from this series? Because especially when you're preparing for a World Cup, like this entire cycle has been built around for the Matildas, you learn just as much from your successes and your wins as you do from your defeats and your losses. And we've seen in the past, I'm thinking back to the Brazil series, I'm thinking back to the Olympics, I'm thinking back to the New Zealand series. There have been times when there have been wins and there's been things to build on. Some of the lessons from those series have been taken. I'm particularly thinking about the Katrina Gorry, breakout star of the New Zealand series, seems to have cemented her place in the starting 11 on the Matildas as a result of that, but we have seen other lessons fall by the wayside. And what I'm really intrigued moving forward now is that, because this was, yet again, this was an understrength Matildas side, like it was an understrength Denmark side. We need to acknowledge that as well. I think in terms of talent level, this was a Danish side that maybe was sort of similar to around maybe the Irish team that the Matildas played last year in terms of top-end talent. Congratulations on the Irish girls for qualifying for the World Cup as well. But it's going to be interesting to see. Like Taryn's talked about, there was a change in formation. We saw the game-breaking introduction of Alex Chidiac. We saw the different roles that Courtney Vine played. Now, I think our discussions on TNC about how Courtney Vine is asked to play a whole different role from Matildas that her clubs never ask her to play. However, she's played another role in this one. We saw the extra importance of Caitlin Ford for this side when Sam Kerr was out. So we've seen all of that. How many of those are actually going to be learned from and implemented into how this team sets up moving forward? Or is it just a case of Sam Kerr comes back and she's not ill, other players come back from injury, and we just revert to what was previously going on because now the best players are back and we're just going to go back to all of that sort of stuff? And wasn't that a fun diversion? If something goes wrong at the World Cup, we'll do that. But right now we're going back to this. That is going to be my question moving forward from this series.
Well, that was quite a treatise. Joey, thank you for that. Thank you for your great contribution tonight. Excellent shift backing up after your A-League, your actual jobs. Nick, Joey, thank you for tonight. We'll speak to you
I have to
soon.
go home and write an ESPN article, so keep an eye out on that.
What is your life?
In ESPN tomorrow?
I just need to go home and sleep because I'm absolutely rooted after today. So it's been a long weekend. I need to go. Yeah, see you, fellas. It's been a pleasure.
Ticker levels exhausted. Good night, guys. We'll stick around here with Taryn and Teo. Well, we've become anime characters all of a sudden. There we go. Taryn, Joey brought up a lot of things just then. Do you think there will be long-term lessons taken from this game?
I hope so. It's incredibly difficult to know if there will be. I can't look at my crystal ball. I think there should be. There should be long-term lessons. I think, Joey was talking about the fact that we have an understrength team, and yes, we do. We're certainly missing. We're missing a first-choice centre back. We're missing first-choice right back, Ellie Carpenter. Missing Lydia Williams as well, but Tegan Mike are probably not too far behind. I would suggest, but it's not far away from a team that you would think could go into a World Cup game, and I think should go into a World Cup game. It's not far away. I think this podcast obviously is going to talk about Alex Chidiac. I think that's a fairly unanimous opinion from all of us here and from the Twitter sphere that Alex Chidiac could and should be starting. But the way that it all sort of worked is not it's not far away from what could be our best 11 in a World Cup game, even if everyone was fit. So yes, it was an understrength Denmark team. I was speaking to a Danish friend about it. She said there was really only 3 or 4 first choice starters that they would normally have. So it wasn't just Pernilla Harder. It was a very experimental team for them more broadly. But nonetheless, it was European opposition that we beat, and we beat well. And I think that there does need to be lessons taken from that moving forward.
Teo, the Chidiac propaganda that we run on this podcast has begun to infiltrate other media sources that you may contribute to. What did you make of the impact substitute coming on and less than a minute later turning the game around off her own back?
Well, I mean, I used the word obvious, but this team's refusal to do the obvious has been one of my greatest issues with it. I suppose, the idea that if Jallup, Van Egmond and Wheeler had all been fit and Lagazzo's coming back, Chidiac maybe isn't even in this squad, really goes to show that close-minded, sunk cost fallacy thinking still dictates so much of what this team does. This player is senior. We've invested a lot of time and effort in them. They're popular within the group. Therefore, they must be picked. This young player, we've invested 10, 15, 20 caps in them. They've come through the young Matildas. They've come through the system. Therefore, they must be picked. The idea that we put on Larissa Crummer at right back in a friendly in London when Polly Doran is right there playing for Crystal Palace, I mean, my point is proven, right? Now, it's their prerogative, and if they're picking teams that win, guess what? All is forgiven. But I said exactly the same thing after Australia got knocked out of the Asian Cup. All the things that I thought maybe were just gripes of my own or my own fascinations or nuances or little irrelevant details that may not matter, they all get glossed over when you win. But when you lose or when you're not convincing, then they become actual problems that need to be fixed. I still think that the sunk cost fallacy is going to dictate a lot of the thinking around both who's in charge and also who we pick. The good thing is we have a 20-game A-League women's season for players to both play their way into contention and play their way out of contention. And just because they're outside the tent at the moment doesn't mean they can't play their way into the tent. Holly McNamara is proof that if you are head and shoulders above the A-League women's, regardless of how weak the naysayers want to say that it is, you can still play your way in. And it will be a stronger league this season because the borders are open and COVID's over and most teams are going to have 4 foreigners, if not four foreigners plus a guest marquee again. So it is going to be, I think, a stronger league than what we saw last summer. I guess my final point is, and it's a shame Debano had to leave because it is an AFL analogy, that when a board or a CEO or an administration of an AFL club have their guy as the head coach and it's not working, the board knows that they go if they sack the coach, or the CEO knows that they go if they sack the coach. So the coach has to stay and the coach has to work out. So you know what they do? They re-stump the house and they change all the assistants. And it happens plenty of times in the AFL that they will re-stump the house, they will hire different assistants. And what did the Matildas do before this game, or before both games? They hired Jens Fjällström, the former Swedish international. It was nice and subtle. He hasn't gone down media street. No one really knows who he is. I wonder, are they re-stumping the house? Tony G's their guy, and we know we're stuck with him until the World Cup, probably until the Olympics. We'll have to make do, right? But are they going to re-stump the house? Tony G has prided himself on being king delegator, or in my opinion, abdicator of responsibility at times. So if he's going to be king delegator, why not focus on who he delegates to? It's actually kind of, if you have to save face in a PR sense, it's kind of what you would do. So is Fjällström now going to have a far greater role in what happens? Are the people that Tony G had previously been delegating to going to have less of a role? Is Tony G going to take more of a responsibility himself? I mean, let's be honest. If he's out here for A-League women's season, watching 5 games a week for 20 weeks, you cannot tell me that we're not going to have bolters in potentially every position popping up like spot fires. And whether it's a Deborah Ann Delaharp or a Chelsea Blissett or a Kirsty Fenton, it doesn't matter who the name is now, because the games have to actually play and the players have to play their way in. But there's so much potential, and that excites me. And look, I agree with Taryn. It was nice to win. And I think Denmark, even regardless of how weak their team was, I think all the European teams in Pot B for the World Cup should be really worried about getting battered at this World Cup by the Pot A teams, because we saw it at the Euros with Norway getting beaten 8-0 and Denmark getting beaten 4-0 by Germany and Italy getting smashed 5-1 by France. That second tier of European teams is super sus, and that is why I still think Australia will make the quarterfinals at a minimum at the World Cup.
Wow. Nani and Teo breaking the Sharon rule in the space of a week. Incredible. No, this show is not an AFL-free zone, I'm afraid.
Too many Victorians. So the one person on tonight's episode that lives in New South Wales is a lifelong Victorian minus 6 years. And then the one person from New South Wales, sort of, that's on the show now is in Victoria as we speak. So...
they've infiltrated. I want to know where the re-stumping of the house leaves the made bed situation. Like, did you have to unmake the bed before you re-stump the house? You know,
I think
do we have to sleep in it?
The smartest thing the Matildas can do is challenge all of their assumptions and just dismiss the idea of the sunk cost fallacy. Get it out. Just, look at what's in front of you rather than be weighed down by the pressures of what you've previously committed to, or seemingly the investment that you've made to get to where you are.
Taryn, anywhere you want to go from there is fine. Any thread you would like to pick?
Picking the thread on the bed that's been made.
Yeah.
No,
the quilt cover of the made bed underneath the re-stumped house. Yep. In the re-stumped house. Sorry.
I think, I guess going on the sunk cost fallacy, there's also this issue of hierarchies, and again, that's been talked about before within the Matildas. I think it is important to look at things from as fresh a slate as possible, and I think this is why. And like, just for me personally, it doesn't. It concerns me in a broader picture, but just looking from now to the World Cup, where we know that the coach isn't going to change and these things aren't going to change, as long as if we're seeing progress, it kind of, I'm happy, because I wasn't expecting to. I thought that we were going to go back to the 4-3-3 in this game. I thought that we were going to see the same stuff. I thought that Vine was going to go back out and Kerr was going to play again, and it was going to be the exact same. And to actually see a change of thinking, and I thought Kyrie Cross had a fine game. I don't necessarily think that she is the best person in that squad to be starting, but it's still, I would still rather see her in that position than other players that we've seen in the past. She's still, you know, she's the young player coming through. I would still rather see that, and I'm glad that we're seeing that. So I think for me, the biggest thing that I want to see is just the tearing down of this hierarchy and this stubbornness and this, you know, we play this way because we play this way. Pick the players that work the best in the system and things will be better. It's not FIFA. It's not you have player ratings and you pick your 11 best players in the player ratings to make it work. Players have different attributes that will work differently in a system to function better. And I think for the first time, we are seeing in a while, we're seeing green shoots of something that is functional. And I don't care so much about the other things. I just want to see functioning. And if that means that the 10th best player, you know, best player is not in the 11 because they don't suit the 11, great. Like, just
well,
specifically,
Taryn, I think these two games, it took us on a step towards, because my theory from ever since the end of the Olympics is we will probably make the quarterfinals of the World Cup. It's really a question of, are we going to enjoy the journey and is it going to make sense? Or are we going to resent it every step of the way? I still think, the RBA, the results-based analysis, for me, it's always largely been the same. What aggravates me is that we see these players go to the WSL and dominate. We might crown our first ever Ballon d'Or player this week, but the whole is not greater than the sum of its parts when they play for the Matildas. So anything that gets us closer to that surely is the objective.
Yes. And I think that we're beginning to see that. I think specifically, you know, how do we get the best out of these players and these systems? I would say, like, Mary Fowler's probably in the best 11 players, but she was never going to fit the way that we were playing in this system. Like, I think potentially you could play her as like a false 9 alongside Kerr or something like that. But she wasn't in the best 11 for the way that we wanted to play, and so she didn't start. And that, to me, that actually fills me with optimism. Like, I'm so glad that she wasn't shoehorned in to play as a 6 or something, because God knows that's what would have happened in the past, or, you know, that's half what I was expecting. It sort of moving towards a system where players are playing in their best position in order to, you know, putting aside the fact that, you know, 3 days before this game, we saw Larissa Kramer right back. Put that aside. The game against Denmark was moving towards a system where the best players were playing in the best positions in order to create the best environment for the best team. And that's what I've been crying out for. And I don't want to be too optimistic. Like, maybe this is the fan coming out in me.
No, I think you can be optimistic, because the cut through that winning got really shows what a missed opportunity the Canada series was.
Yes.
Because for a game that kicked off at 3 a.m, was only on my employer, Paramount Plus. So I hope you were all subscribed in order to watch live, as I was at 3 a.m. I was awake. But the thing about the cut through, the social media, the reporting, the response, it just goes to show how much further the team goes when they win. But it's pleasing to know that the reason we won wasn't through fluke or accident, or like against Great Britain at the Olympics where we were out XG'd by 3. It's really because I think the team made smart decisions and won based on the fact that they put round pegs in the round holes, or they identified the opportunity to give players minutes that they otherwise may not have had their hand not been forced by injury, and it worked. And instead of freaking out and just making a raft of substitutions and sort of, for 10 or 15 minutes against South Africa, we had the Chids-Gorry midfield, but then we had the triple substitution come soon after and kind of disrupted it, and the end of the game became junk time. This time they were chasing the game. They needed it. And so they actually stuck with it, and it worked. And it's just so nice that it resonated with the public, and it doesn't matter whether it's 3 a.m. or whether it's 7:30 prime time on a Saturday. It resonated, and that is what is so reassuring about. I think, can we say we turned a corner with this game? I absolutely think we can. Yeah,
I think you're right, Taryn. It's not FIFA, it's Football Manager, and you need some joined up thinking when you're developing your tactic. I gravitated towards this result because that sweet confirmation bias was fantastic, and Chid's coming on, and then immediately the game changing is
but Josh, you know what?
Brand.
But it's not just about Chids, because I'm sure that these sort of decisions can be made for other positions, other roles, and other players into the future. It's the fact it happened once. Yes, it's reassuring to us on the outside, but we are on the outside, And for as much as we consider ourselves experts, we don't know the interpersonal dynamics within the squad, the relationships with the coach, the ability to process and learn, and all these other things. All we do is judge it based on the games, but I still feel pretty confident that judging it based on the games is enough to form an informed opinion.
How good was this, Taryn? How good was this performance overall? Because, I mean, it felt real good, but there were also 2 absolute screamers amongst the 3 goals that we scored.
There was, but we still out XG'd them. We still outplayed them. It wasn't a fluke. Yes, there was screamers, but I think I looked. I think they had 2 shots on target. There was there was the clearance off the line, there was the goal they scored, and then a real dangerous counterattack after we equalised. And I think that was largely it. So it was good. It was, and I think, it was a win against European opposition in Europe. There are caveats, obviously 4:30 in the morning. Oh, we're winning the World Cup. This is the greatest. Obviously not
this,
the case.
This is your brain on no sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, hyped up on coffee and sugar and all sorts. I think realistically, it's not the holy grail. It's not a sign that we've completely turned a corner. It's not a sign that we're a phenomenal team suddenly. But what it does indicate is this almost like long forgotten, almost all year, all of this calendar year, there's been this kind of simmering sort of, are we completely rubbish? The questions on this show, or are we even going to make it out of the group stage? Well, no, actually we are quite a good team. We will make it out of the group stage.
I'm sorry, but anyone running that sincerely rather than facetiously just either doesn't know ball or is just too far gone on trying to run defense or trying to, make a straw man out of, it's A-League women's fault that the national team can't pick the best players. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah. We're still a good team, and I think that this result, obviously externally, we know what it does for us as people from the outside. Internally, it could also have quite an uplifting effect as well, because for all of the sort of, as I said, as I was writing that match report on the 50th minute, valiant 1-0 defeat.
Hey, we invent stuff all the time. You watch all the social media accounts and the other podcasts and all the Reddit posts. They're going to start saying gallant now because they heard it on TNC first.
That's the way. That is the analysis. It was gallant. And suddenly, half an hour later, I was fist pumping the air, and I see we're winning the World Cup, and it does have that impact, and I think that that's really important.
Well, speaking of brains on no sleep, Joey Lynch, we thought we got rid of him, but he's from an undisclosed location, maybe in a park somewhere, or is it the Melbourne Victory training ground? We're not sure. Joey, why are you still here? Go home.
Well, you see, I had to park ages away, and I'm walking back, and I figured if I get robbed and murdered, I might as well do it live on air, because think of the ratings when that happens. No, but I have been listening. I also did have, and I'm going to say it now before I cross the road and the cars come in, but think of what Teo and you were talking about, the cut through that this win got and how good the vibes were, despite the fact that it happens at 3 a.m. And Teo, you were also talking about how, in a situation like this, it's the board and the CEOs are riding on it as well. At the end of the day, and I've said this in the past, there's nothing that's going to endear this team and going to create this legacy that we're all talking about and we're all so sure is going to happen, like winning. I said it, everybody's pointing at the legacy in England from the Euros. The Lionesses won the bloody thing. The best way to shore up your position if you are a CEO, if you are a board, if you are a coach, is to bloody win things. So I think that would be the reason, why you would hope that the lessons from this series were imparted and are followed up on, because they bloody won. And as Taryn said, they bloody won in a manner that wasn't, being outscored by 3 XG, but then fluking your way into a bronze medal game anyway. So I think it doesn't have to be a decision between, marketing and legacy and making sure that, the biggest names and the headline grabbers are always in the team and, long-term legacy and all that. At the end of the day, that's all nice in the short term, but winning is going to leave the longest term legacy. And I think that's what's important to keep in mind when we're thinking about, are the lessons from this going to be imparted?
Joey, keep your wits about you. We're going to go to the draw, shall we?
Thanks for success.
Thanks for success, Joey. Let's talk about our dream draw. I've got it up on the screen here. I'm
not leaving. Why did you all think I'm leaving? I'm going to keep staying.
You're staying with us in the park, are you, Joey? All right, fair enough.
I'm going to walk. I'm just going to put myself on mute as I cross the road.
So, Taryn, who do you want? Because the draw's coming up on Saturday. What is your dream draw for the World Cup, based on any criteria you like? And keeping in mind, we can't get another AFC team, and there can only be 2 European teams per group.
So
and I apologize for covering your face with this with this Wikipedia screenshot.
It's okay. My face doesn't really add anything. It's okay. So, yeah, I was thinking about this today. Pot 2 is all sort of imminently dangerous. I think obviously we probably want to avoid Canada. The Netherlands aren't in the best spot. Maybe we could take the Netherlands. Probably Italy though. Probably Italy from pot 2 would be sort of
tempting fate after the last World Cup.
It is tempting fate after the last World Cup. I do remember I watched that game in a very small cafe in a random place in I think in Barcelona. Anyway, beside the point. Pot 3, I mean, anyone really. I think a full strength Denmark is a bit more dangerous. So probably anyone but a full strength Denmark, to be honest with you. And then pot 4, anyone's fine, really. I think South Africa
speaking
again.
Of the playoffs, it'd probably be Chile through one of them. It could be maybe Paraguay, if I'm speculating here, and probably Portugal.
Probably Portugal, yeah. But the pot 4 with Chinese Taipei, Panama, Paraguay, and the other one, that's true group of life World Cup miracle stuff, that one. So,
yeah, I actually, to be fair, I have no idea who the strongest women's team is out of those countries.
So my dream draw, and I think we're getting out of our group regardless of how perceived tough it is, but I just want the biggest crowds, the best atmosphere. So I'm taking Netherlands, because I think that they will send plenty of travelling fans, colourful, noisy, and so forth. Republic of Ireland, obviously huge connection to Australia, first time in a Women's World Cup, plenty of travellers as well. And then I think if Chile get through the playoff, Chile's the best choice there. So some people would balk at the idea of 2 European teams in the group, but that I think would be the dream draw for the Matildas. And honestly, the one thing I want from this World Cup draw is for the United States and England to draw in Australia-based groups. If either of those two go to New Zealand, why are we even staging this World Cup? Sorry, New Zealand, but we need to heat up the balls. And if we're heating up the balls for anything, it is for the United States group and for England's group to be based in Australia, because frankly, it'll be wasted on New Zealand if either of those two teams go there.
Wow, really shots fired at our Kiwi colleagues.
Prove me wrong.
I mean, this is a joint World Cup, Teo. You do understand that. It's
a joint World Cup. And we gave them one of our best 20-year-old players, Indy Riley, and we gave one of our best left backs, Ali Green. Is that not enough? Do we have to give you our neutral delights in the form of getting to watch England and also just have the spotlight? I mean, if the US's games are in New Zealand, the entire of the United States is going to think the World Cup's in New Zealand.
That's true.
They're going to think New Zealand invaded us, and that Sydney is a New Zealand city when they make the final.
I mean, how the world has changed since Flight of the Conchords, where every New Zealander was mistaken for an Australian in America.
They'll think the tournament is New Zealand sports washing because they invaded Australia.
Honestly,
let's not rule it out.
If France 2019 is anything to go by, half of them won't come until the final anyway, because of course the US will win everything and will win the final. So maybe you
just book your tickets for one game.
Yeah, exactly. It's all good.
Yeah, go team. All right. Taryn, I do need to address a serious topic with you before we let you go.
Wait, hold on. I don't get to do my fantasy booking?
I didn't do mine either, Joey. Come on. I was just going to say the same thing as Teo, so... Joey, you got a different answer?
I wanted to, if you want to put it up real quickly, I wanted to go with a completely vibes-based World Cup group. So if you bring it back on, I would like to see us get Brazil.
Because capybaras are better than kangaroos, is that why?
I would like to see Brazil, Jamaica, and Nigeria. Because I just feel like the vibes of those teams would be immaculate.
I mean, those Jamaicans will be running scared of Sam Kerr after last time. We gave him a good set.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to do a Jamaican accent because it's terrible and slightly racist. But the reggae girls coming out, that'd be fantastic, and the Brazilian and the samba, and it would be proper well good.
Well, the other intrigue is what draw can New Zealand get to plausibly get out of their group? Because I do think New Zealand probably will beat every team in pot 4 except Chile. If Chile make it, they might struggle with Nigeria, but I reckon they can beat the Philippines and South Africa and Morocco and Zambia. Oh, actually, they might struggle with Zambia. But yeah, I don't know if there's a road to New Zealand getting out of their group as co-host. So.
Have you seen Ireland play, Teo?
Ireland beat Australia.
Well, that's true, but they're pretty one-dimensional. I'll be honest. Like, they have a long throw specialist. They won with 27% possession against Scotland. So.
Yes, and that should make them perfectly suited to playing in Australia.
That's true. This could be their natural habitat. But yes, Taryn, I do want to address a very serious topic, and that is your performance in our fantasy league. What is happening to I Will Forget FC? You lost
I forgot immediately. I was completely correct with the team name.
You lost by 37 points today to yours truly. 37.
Look, I'm telling you, I honestly did this, Joey very kindly sent me the link, and then I forgot about it until 2 days before, and I thought, oh God, I should do this. And I was in the middle of something, and I was like, okay, no, I've got to do the fantasy team. And I did it on my phone, and I couldn't quite figure out the layout. And then I thought to myself, no, I'll go back on my laptop and I'll make sure that everything's properly done and I've got a captain and everything. And then I forgot to do that part. So it's been 2 weeks later and I've got 37 points.
You had 6 DNPs.
We need to do some serious renovation on your team, just so. We need to
re-stump that thing. We need to remake the bed.
Yes, we need to remake the bed, re-stump the house.
Look, now that I've been called out openly, I did realize this yesterday. Joey was like, oh yeah, Taryn, head to head with Teo. I'm like, who did that? That feels deeply unfair.
Well, Joey, just to check, last week you gave everyone a week's notice to intervene and say if you don't want your results in the head-to-head league read out, speak now or forever hold your peace. Did anyone actually want anonymity?
Nobody has reached out to me and said they wanted to be anonymous. So as my battery ticks over to 8%, I prepare to leave again, this time for real. Sucked in, Grace Gill. You went down to Chiefs of Staff FC, who I believe were the highest scorers in this round of fantasy.
All right. Are we actually saying thanks and success to you now, Joey?
Yeah, because I'm in the back streets of Cremorne and I got no idea where I am.
All right. Thanks and success. Use your last 8% on GPS.
Thank you very much. See you guys.
All right. So we've gone 2.5 hours. Let's quickly run through the fantasy results, Josh. We've got a couple of randoms, one of whom I lost to this week by 1 point. Agonizing. I was watching Ryan Grant, hoping he would get a yellow card or sent off in the dying minutes of the Sydney FC game. Sadly, he did not. He held his nerve, and I went down 93 points to 94 against Alan Brosk FC, whoever that is. Reveal yourself. We had another 1 point result, Bimby's Boys, which I believe is, again, another random. 16 out of our 20-team league, we know. The randoms had an incredible weekend.
And these were auto-filled, by the way. We haven't just given this code to anybody.
So Bimby's Boys 119 defeated Mike Wise from ESPN 118 with his team. With his team, listen here, F faces. I'm not sure what that refers to, though.
No, I don't get that reference.
No, neither. Joey's Chiefs of Staff FC defeated Grace Gill's GGFC 120 points to 82. Actually, a pretty good score and a loss from Grace, but Joey had Jamie McLaren as captain. Your team, Josh, FC Smooth Brain, at arm's length from Taryn's I Will Forget, the house that will be re-stumped in the coming weeks, 82 points to 45. Vinta Milan, Vince Regari, defeated Anna Harrington's rather controversially named team, which we are not allowed to read out on air. Anna, just edgelord Anna Harrington, just bringing the steam. 81 points to 74. Phil Rollo, Taryn, you want to play Phil Rollo next week because is Alino's Bridge Nick DeBano?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Alino's Bridge, 58 points. That's a very low winning score to Phil Rollo's Tasman United 44. So, Taryn, you would have beaten Phil Rollo by 1 point this weekend had you played him. So, the trash talk of New Zealand continues. Now, Razor Rise Hermanos, Alex, is that a random, Josh, or is that someone we know?
I think that's Pav from Melbourne Victory.
Oh, okay. Well, he won 88 points to 55 against Jason Pine's Tawa Pine. So, Jason Pine...
We have Melbourne Victory's media manager in our league, just so you know.
Then we had Ryan with an H and his team called Derek's that defeated the team called TNC Live Sundays, which I assume is Nick Stoll. 77 points to 62. Andrew, the last random, defeated Lockie Flanagan's Demigods, 97 points to 46. Did Lockie Flanagan forget he had a team as well? And then the very last result, an incredible draw, 79 points each. Ben Smith and his My Castro Romance, drawing with Demir Kulash's Daddy Qual. So we had two contests decided by 1 point and a draw. Safe to say, A-League Fantasy is incredible. And I know there's nothing more boring than hearing people talk about their fantasy teams. But if you made it through 2.5 hours of this podcast, you wanted to hear this last 3 minutes. So there you go. Those are the results. The league rankings at the moment.
One of the randoms is top.
Great. Okay. Well,
I'm second. I mean, my goal difference did benefit from playing Taryn.
And as did I, because I lost by 1 point, but the previous week, Taryn gave me a nice little percentage booster. And then Anna Harrington's name-redacted team is in fourth. But we'll keep you posted with that over the course of the season, because pride's on the line. Pride is genuinely on the line. And if we keep reading out the results each weekend, I think everyone is going to want to make sure that they actually maintain their team through the course of the season.
And also shout out our TNC public league, not the head-to-head one, but just the total score one.
Yes, who's top of the public league?
Okapi FC. That's Moosey's team. So shout out to you.
How many? I'm currently 95th in WoW Waddle League. How many is that out of? I'm hoping it's at least 300.
It's a pretty big league. I'm not sure of the exact number, but it looks like
287.
Yeah, that's pretty good turnout, I have to say, from the TNC fam. I'm 50th 59th. I've gone down 58 places from last week. So.
Well, congratulations to Clarkies11, #GotWood, and Nifty FC, whoever that is. They're the top 4. We did say we were going to give away an imaginary prize for the best team names. We will get to that, maybe not at the 2 hour 45 mark of tonight's podcast, but maybe we'll park that, Josh, for next week.
Well, incredible ticker from all involved today. We have gone 2 hours and 43 minutes. That's probably a new record. Thank you, Taryn. Very much appreciated. And apologies for the bullying and slander at the end of the podcast after you waited so patiently.
I deserved it with 45 points. So what can I say? I will pay more attention next time.
Hey, you were honest and upfront with what we were to expect in your team name.
You get 2 trades a week. This can be turned around very quickly. We'll get Jonas Fjellstrom to recommend you 2 trades, and I reckon that'll start to turn it around.
I think we might need Dr. Fittimer to fix Taryn's team, but that's a deep cut. All right, thank you, Teo, and thank you, everyone. If you stayed till the 2 hour 44 minute mark, you are a true TNC super fan, so we appreciate you. Good night.